everyone is here and in their places. So I'm going to bring the special meeting of Township Council to order. And the first item is the adoption and receipt of the agenda items. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved, Ferguson.
Second, Davis.
First and second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries. Move on to presentations. We have a presentation from staff on non-medical cannabis retail sales development applications. I'll turn it over to Mr. Backen to introduce the topic. Oh, Mr. Seppi will be taking it on. Mr. Seppi.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will begin with, I guess, requesting permission to share the screen, Your Worship.
Yes, please. Yes, thank you.
You see the presentation, Your Worship? Yeah, excellent, thank you. Your Worship, this presentation is in response to Council direction that was provided at the last meeting that this topic was discussed, which was on September 21st, when Council requested that staff schedule a special meeting for the purpose of dealing with non-medical cannabis retail sales, and in particular, actually scheduled the meeting to be on this day, which is October 19th. The presentation outline, Your Worship, is staff thought it might be prudent to spend a few minutes to remind everyone as to the background and the history of cannabis retail and how we came to be where we are today. We also hope to provide an overview of the municipal versus provincial powers and the responsibilities of the local government and that of the province through the liquor and cannabis regulating branch. And then we'll discuss the policy provisions that Council adopted, the policy that Council adopted, as well as additional criteria that staff developed, and follow on with the individual applications that have been received. And we'll end, Your Worship, with, I guess, some recommendations for Council to consider and potentially next steps. So in terms of background and history of the whole issue of cannabis retail, just very briefly, on October 17th, 2018, almost 2 years ago exactly, the Federal Cannabis Act and Cannabis Regulations Act came into effect, legalizing recreational cannabis in Canada. The federal government's responsibilities include licensing the medical cannabis regime through the provinces and establishing health and safety standards. Then on the same day, October 17, 2018, the province of British Columbia enacted Cannabis Control and Licensing Act and Cannabis Distribution Act. The province has authority to establish cannabis wholesale and retail licensing regime, as well as other regulations such as minimum age to purchase and the sale and consumption of cannabis and enforcement thereof. The Provincial Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, LCRB for short, is responsible for issuing licenses for cannabis retail stores. And before a license can be issued, the local government, where the store is proposed to be located, is required to provide comments. So with the federal and provincial regulations in place, we had a decision to make at the local level in Township of Langley as to whether to allow for retail sale of non-medical cannabis in the township or not. With that, Your Worship, again, as a reminder, on May of this year, Council received a presentation from staff that directed staff, subsequently, Council directed staff to proceed with a public consultation process. The presentation that staff provided that resulted in the direction from Council was essentially informing Council as to what other municipalities are doing with respect to what was shown on a map as either green, in other words, those that are allowing retail cannabis in their municipalities, or red municipalities, those that do not provide for cannabis retail. Subsequently, Council approved the terms of reference and directed staff to proceed with engaging the public based on the terms of reference, which was then completed last year, late last year and early this year. and included an online survey, open houses, and in-person meetings. In December of last year, Council identified the issues also, just to sort of remind Council, the issue of cannabis retail was identified by Council as one of the top 5 strategic priorities for the current term. Continuing with background and history, in March of this year, Council received the results of the public engagement process and directed staff to proceed with establishing the regulatory framework that would inline or would be consistent and reflective of the public input that would essentially allow for a cannabis retail operation in a limited way, one per community or neighborhood, to be located in the commercial core. This was the essence of the public feedback. And Council authorized staff to prepare the policy document that reflected that public feedback and bring forward for Council approval. Applications were then submitted by proponents and were processed based on the historic procedures that also are included in the policy, which is essentially on a first-come, first-served basis. However, at its meeting in July of this year, after receiving a recommendation to proceed with 2 applications that had been submitted that met the policy objectives, Council referred the matter back to staff, pending submission by staff of a report that included all applications that were received by August 31st, by area, together all of them by area, and directed staff also to develop additional criteria that would assist Council with the selection process. Finally, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, Your Worship, staff present Council with the batch group, grouping of the applications that were submitted by August 31st on September 21st of this year, earlier last month. And after receiving the information, Council then referred the matter to this meeting for a special presentation and discussion solely on the topic of cannabis retail operations in the Township of Langley. Your Worship, this is a flow chart, which I hope is not too busy. I hope it serves the purpose that I had in mind, in that it provides a bit of a process and integration and the integrated approach that we have, and somewhat, overlapping responsibilities between the province and the local government. So on the left side of the slide, you will see the boxes that have a green shade in the background. Those are essentially the municipal or local government responsibilities. And on the right side of the slide, you see the boxes that have the pink or the orange or the salmon, shading and background that outline the provincial or the liquor and cannabis regulating branch responsibilities and procedural requirements. When an application is referred from, or actually an application is submitted to the province, it is then referred to the local government. In the Township of Langley, in the case of the Township of Langley, the applicants also must include a land use rezoning application at the same time. Again, just a reminder, throughout the province, in any municipality that allows retail cannabis sales, the provincial requirements are for the municipal government to provide comments. In the case of the Township of Langley, because of the fact that our zoning bylaw does not currently provide for, allow cannabis retail operations, we also require a rezoning application. So these 2 applications must be submitted. They're not submitted always at the same time, but we typically wait for the referral of the liquor and cannabis regulating branch to refer the application to the municipality before we process the rezoning applications going forward. The municipality is then required as part of the provincial regulations. This is not to do with our zoning powers, but rather the provincial requirements require the municipality to provide a comment to the province, back to the province, as to whether it supports the application or not, or if it has a positive or a negative recommendation. If a municipality does not respond to the referral, the application ends, it dies at that point. However, if the municipality responds back and says that we are in the process of reviewing the application, then the province will not issue the license and will hold on to the process until such time as the municipality has provided its confirmation that the land use issues have been addressed and the license can be issued. So again, just to spend a couple of minutes, just to go down the various paths, if you will. On the left side, staff review for completeness and policy compliance. The referral from the province is made in the meantime. Then the application is processed for council to consider initial readings. The Liquor and Cannabis Regulating Branch confirms that the application is fit and proper. Now, this is interesting terminology that actually is in the legislation. The province has included this in the act, the fit and proper language, and it is for the province through the general manager of the Liquor and Cannabis Regulating Branch to determine whether an applicant, not the application, but the applicant is actually fit and proper to have the ability to the license to operate a facility. This includes such things as their past history, their experience, their associates, in fact, their partners, the company. All of those details are reviewed by the province through this fit and proper legislation and review process. If the applicant is deemed to be not fit and proper, the application ends. There's no license, there's no need for referral from the local government. However, if the applicant is deemed to be fit and proper, the review continues. So in the meantime, on the left side, we have the application being considered by council for first and second reading, and the public hearing process that follows first and second reading. Then if the public hearing is successful, if council deems that the application can proceed, well, first of all, let's go down the path that the application may not proceed. If the application is not granted third reading by council, that's the end of the application. Then the province is advised that the application is not supported by the local government. And similarly, just like the fit and proper path, the application then ends. The application does not proceed. However, if council decides that the application is worthy of proceeding based on the policy provisions or other broader objectives of public interest that council has total jurisdiction over, unfettered, the application can proceed. And then at some point, it is then held until such time as the provincial approval in principle is granted. Once the approval in principle is granted, the local government is then advised essentially that the applicant has been deemed to be fit and proper, and the application can proceed to be granted final reading. Then the letter of confirmation of the zoning being in place is provided to the province, and then the province provides final approval, and then that then allows the municipality to actually go through the business licensing process, because remember, notwithstanding the zoning powers and the land use matters, we also have the licensing power, and then the applicant is required to follow that process for health and safety and building code and fire code regulation and compliance. In terms of the policy that council adopted, again, just as a reminder, and also it's important to notice, or to note rather, that this does not, again, federal council's discretion to deal with other matters. It is really intended to provide both internal and external stakeholders, staff and others who may be interested, a certain level of certainty. I say that in quotation marks. It is not actually certainty, but a level of comfort, if you will, that if an application was to comply with the policy, it would likely receive council's approval, likely being the key word. It is not, again, guaranteeing anything. It is just a policy document that allows the public to understand what council might be looking for in applications coming forward. The policy then has the scope, it has the purpose, and it provides locational guidelines. it also restricts the applications or the operations of a cannabis retail operation to 1 per community for a total possible number of 8. And it provides locational criteria such as the proximity to other sensitive uses such as schools and parks and to be located within commercial centers. In addition, Council directed staff to develop some criteria that might be useful for Council to consider applications. And this was something that was developed by staff based on what are used in other municipalities, best management practices, if you will, of commonly used objectives. Those include what is happening in Abbotsford, Maple Ridge, Port Coquitlam, New Westminster, and the 2 North Vancouver municipalities of the district and the city of North Vancouver. And these include such considerations as proximity to other sensitive uses that are not identified in the policy, such as, say, group children's daycare, emergency shelters, proximity to other cannabis retail uses, proximity to the municipal boundary, parking, access, egress, and other considerations. All of these matters were referenced in the September 2021 report to Council. And there are, as well as the policy provisions, as well as the additional criteria considerations, the thing that staff noted in the September 21 report to Council was the individual applicants' submissions of letters of rationale or letters of intent, if you will, which included other considerations that were on a case-by-case basis. They differed in their proposals, but they included other non-tangible or potentially tangible matters for Council to consider. Those were all included in the September 21 report to Council. So just in the tabular format, just to summarize, existing policy criteria, the 200-meter buffer to parks, schools, recreation centers, and other cannabis stores. The timing of the applicant or the application when it was submitted is important because that's a consideration that is actually identified in the policy the Council adopted. It is pursuant to historic development application review processes, geographic location and barriers such as highways, rail corridors, water courses, the need for 1 per community or the provision of 1 per community, the fact that it is ideally located in a commercial zoning and designation and central to the community. And then the additional criteria that were developed were related to other uses such as children's daycare, whether other cannabis retail applications have been submitted, and requirements for access and egress. Applications as of August 31st, 2020. We have 8 in Aldergrove, 3 in the area known as the 200 Street Interchange, 3 in Fort Langley, 1 in Murrayville, Walnut Grove, and Willoughby, and 3 in Willowbrook. This was identified for Council before, and there have been subsequent applications that have been submitted. Your Worship, I might as well at this point advise Council that staff see no objection or no issues, no constraints with proceeding with those applications that are the only ones in their respective communities. And one of the staff recommendations is actually for Council to authorize staff to proceed with those. We'll get to that later on as part of the presentation. This table, again, I hope it's not too crowded. I hope it provides a summary snapshot of the status of the applications. As you can see, it has the community in which the applications are located, the folder number, which actually is ranked from 1 onwards based on the application date. So if you go down the second column, you see CR1. That tells you that that was the first application that was submitted. Then the owner's name, the store name, because not always do they go with the same name as what you might expect. Then the applicant's name. These columns were added in response to a request from a member of Council. This is not the same table that was provided before in the September 21 report. It has provided all the information that staff currently has at its disposal based on the application requirements that each applicant has provided. So the applicant's name, the agent's name, the application date, the civic address, what community they're located in, and whether they're in the commercial center of the community, and whether they're located, or in other words, do they comply with the locational criteria of the policy in terms of the buffering from other sensitive uses. And then you can see the yes, identifying or demonstrating the ones that do comply. And the three that are identified with a slightly different background shading, that background color, are the only ones that are in the respective areas of neighborhood or community. Now, Your Worship, I'm going to spend, I guess, a few more minutes with the next few slides, just going through, well, first of all, the map. This is the overall map showing all of the applications that were submitted by August 31st. And then try to go community by community, if you will, and look at each application within the boundaries of each neighborhood or community area. Beginning with the 200 Street interchange area, there have been some confusion on some, I guess, aspects or some provisions of the policy. Some may see this as a bit of an overlap, if you will. The policy specifically discusses 7 areas for 7 potential operations. Again, just a policy matter. Council can always override that. But as far as the policy is concerned, it talks about 7, but then it also talks about an additional one in the 200 Street interchange area. So for the purposes of the policy, staff is outlining the area in black as the additional area. Within that area, 3 applications have been submitted, as you can see on the screen. So this is the geographic map of the 200 Street interchange area. And this is the tabulation of the 3 in the 200 Street interchange area that shows you the application numbers, the addresses, the owners, the agents, the applicants, the store name, and how each application complies or not with the policy provisions of the policy and the additional criteria developed by staff and other considerations that relate to zoning. Moving on then to Walnut Grove, which has 1 application. That is located at 8840 210th Street. And the application was received in May of this year. Moving on to Willoughby, which also, similar to Walnut Grove, has a single application. It is located at approximately 72nd Avenue and 208th Street. And a table that corresponds with that application that provides council with the information regarding the specifics of the application, the applicant's name, the store name, and whether it complies with the criteria or not, and how many of the criteria points it may be in compliance with. Moving on to Willowbrook, there are 3 applications in the area known as Willowbrook or identified as the Willowbrook Community Plan Area. Again, map and then tabular format. Fort Langley similarly has 3 applications, all along Glover Road, with the details as shown on this table, and the dates that the applications were received. Moving on to Morrieville, there's only 1 application in Morrieville. and how it complies, where it's located and how it complies with the policy provisions and selection criteria. And finally, Your Worship, Oligo, which has 8 applications received by August 31st, and the details as shown on this map, including the dates that the applications were received, the addresses, and how they comply with the various criteria outlined in the policy and additional criteria that were developed by staff. So, Your Worship, for the purpose of disposing of this matter, I guess in a stepwise process, step manner, staff has developed a couple of recommendations. Under Part 1, as I referenced earlier, the recommendation is that Council authorize staff to bring forward the applications that are the only ones within the respective areas for Council to consider the initial bylaw readings of, and then proceed to public hearing. This is Part A. And assuming that this is passed, then we get a little bit more complicated with Part B, which relates to the applications that are not the only one in their respective areas. In other words, multiple applications for the same area. So under this part, Your Worship, if you bear with me, staff have tried to think about potential ways that Council may wish to dispose of this matter, and have come up with 5 potential approaches. In no particular order, Your Worship, they're just presented for Council to consider. And the first one is to seek additional input. Under this scenario, and only should Council, again, only should an application not be the only one in the respective area, Council is then potentially directing staff to proceed with a public input opportunity, another public input opportunity, before Council considers any application in those areas where there's multiple application for consideration of bylaw readings. So this would be in addition to input received to date, it would be prior to first and second reading, it would be in addition to a public hearing. We'll call this option B1. Option B2, I guess arguably it is something that Council has considered before. I say arguably because maybe Council did not have all of the information at its disposal when Council dealt with this matter. Nevertheless, it is an option for Council to consider, and that is something that is outlined in the policy, which is based on historic practices, and that's first come, first served. Again, relating to those applications that are not the only applications in the respective areas. So Council would then authorize staff to proceed with the rezoning process for those applications that were received, the first ones that were received for the respective areas, and only proceed with the other applications on a first come, first served basis, if and only if the one that was received first is either rejected by Council or it proceeds to public hearing and third reading and then is rejected by Council. In other words, if it does not proceed, would the next one come up? The third alternative is a selective process by Council. So this would be essentially Council taking a look at the applications, taking a look at the policy provisions, the additional criteria developed, and then based on broader public interest objectives that only Council has in its full and unfettered discretion the ability to judge and determine, Council could then decide on which applications in the areas that we have received multiple applications can proceed to first and second reading. Again, keeping in mind that that could also, based on public hearing, not proceed further to third reading or maybe even beyond third reading if Council at some point decides that those applications, again, based on public input, are not appropriate to proceed. This is a variation to B3 in that Council would actually delegate to staff the authority to determine which applications are selected to proceed to first and second reading based on the criteria established to date. And finally, Your Worship, the fifth potential option for the applications that are not the only ones in the respective areas would be to bring them all forward for council to consider holistically, I guess, as a batch grouping for each one in their own areas, and council to consider which ones council wish to advance further to either third reading or even beyond third reading, because as said previously on more than one occasion, council is not bound by the restrictions that the policy provides. Council can choose to advance more than one, only one, or none at all, if council desires to deal with the rest of them accordingly, once council considers all of them as a group. With that, Your Worship, this is the summary of the recommendation that staff has for the 5 options with respect to the Part B in a summary tabularized format. B1, we'll call it additional input. B2, we'll call it first come, first served. B3, we'll call it selected process by council. B4, we'll call it selected process by staff. And B5, we'll call it batch processing. Now, this, Your Worship, is the last slide that I had in the presentation, and it outlines the potential next steps that council may wish to consider to direct staff to proceed with. The first one is straightforward. The second one requires council's direction as to which option. And unless you wish to refer to this, Your Worship, I think I will stop sharing unless you want me to not stop, leave this on. How would you like me to proceed?
Thank you. There are some questions from members of council. I know this is, I appreciate this report. It's a lot of, I think all the applications have merit, they're all good applications, and it's a difficult decision for council to make. And I appreciate the work that staff have done to put all these applications into some sort of format that we are very able to analyze them by by check marks and scores, and by having all their business plans and applications included in a package. And we really do appreciate it. That does help. And you've provided us with some options that we can consider. Thank you for that. And certainly we have a good job ahead of us. There are several ways to proceed, and then we'll have a discussion on it. I think there'll be options. One option is that council may want to look at those that scored 7 out of 7, 6 out of 7, and proceed with those, and refer the rest back to staff to see if they can reapply or improve their applications. To come back if they aren't able to get into those areas. But it's just something we can discuss. So I'm going to go to council and open up to discussion and questions. We'll start with Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Can I just ask a couple questions and then maybe some comments? Proximity to municipal boundary. I'm just wondering, we have 2 of them in Aldergrove that are right on the, and maybe I'm not too worried about the 2 that are right on the boundary, but what was the train of thought like on a municipal boundary? Why was that put in there? Just doesn't maybe Mr. Steffi has a comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. The thinking behind that, Your Worship, is I cannot anticipate what the thinking may have been. First of all, it follows what other municipalities have been doing. And secondly, it might make sense if another municipality has approved another cannabis operation in their jurisdiction that might be more than or less than 200 meters from the municipal boundary, which then makes 2 applications close to each other. Now, having said that, there may be nothing wrong with that. And council may say, as an example, that it should be up to the market to decide which one of these will be successful. It is not up to local government to determine the success of applicants based on the type of service, the quality of service that they're providing. But it is nevertheless a consideration for council to have in mind.
Okay, that actually makes sense. The other comment, maybe Mr. Steffi, is it says 1 per community, total possible 8, and we have 7. Well, there's Alder Grove, Fort Langley, Carval, Murrayville, Walnut Grove, Willoughby, and Willowbrook. My math doesn't. Why 1 extra? I think you commented on that, but it slipped my mind. Why the 1 extra?
Yes, thank you. With your permission, Your Worship, it is actually a policy provision. The policy talks about 7 plus another 1, because it recognizes the fact that the interchange, for the most part, the 200 Street interchange area is commercially designated. And as such, it identifies it as a separate additional area. So if you include the interchange area, then it makes the total number 8. Okay.
Those are the 2 questions. Just a couple comments now. We, in our policy, we have some of the presentations or the reports. Some of them are 10, 12 pages long, very nice, and some are just 1 pages of just an intent letter. We've all been we've all been asked to talk about, well, I have been anyhow, have a meeting. We've got lots of really good emails, got a lot of information, and I'm having issues maybe trying to pick one that looks the best. So that leads me to believe that I like what our options are, the staff recommendations, but I'll just stop for a second. I'm concerned, other concerns that I have that maybe brought up by other counselors is the $5,000 thing if they don't get in, and this criteria, and of course, police checks are, but maybe I'll let other counselors, I am concerned about that. This is what, after hearing the report from Mr. Steffi, I feel more confident that we have 5 options there. I'm just concerned about batch processing, because that's basically what we have now, I think. But B, the recommendations, additional public hearing, and then make a decision. Does that qualify? And also for B2, first come, first serve, does that qualify for their, you know, how they have the total check marks? And I guess that flows right into what you were just talking about, you know, framework policy or the criteria. But I'm just wondering if council should actually, I know that we passed, and you did the history, and we passed, we wanted to be able to vote on what we voted on. But I like B4, selective process by staff, because then what will happen is it will be done. I think it should still be having a public hearing, but at least it will be selected by staff on the criteria of the applicant, because like I say, everyone's got lots of input. We've got, who's got the biggest brochure, it's, some companies have other companies in other regions, so I just think that it would, if we have it so that it's simple, it's made by policy and what the heck was the other word? If there's a framework and there's a criteria and it fits into that, I like that idea. I'm just throwing that out there because I want my opinion. I'd like to hear what everyone else says. Anyhow, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councilor Whitmarsh.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Mr. Sefi, for that. I had a couple of questions around the information that you presented to us as well. The first question I had was around the commercial center and having these the applications in a commercial center. Now, I can't, I sort of forget the conversation that maybe we had a number of months ago about commercial center, but does commercial center include sort of could it include industrial kind of park versus a more traditional commercial center, say retail, or could it be industrial? Like, I certainly understand that we wouldn't want it in residential areas, but I'm thinking about commercial including not only retail but also in sort of industrial park or that kind of more industrial area. I'm wondering if that could, if that's what was meant there, or if you could maybe enlighten a little bit more, maybe Mr. Sefi, on what we meant or what was sort of discussed around commercial center and why that seems to be a critical piece.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I guess the designations are as per the community plan or neighborhood plan, and it does not at its face value unless otherwise directed by council. Council can always interpret the policy provisions more clearly for staff to follow. At this point, staff's understanding is that it does not include industrial areas, but rather commercial areas only. There's a reason for that, and that is because industrial areas are historically or have been historically used for employment generating and not retail. And there is, because of that distinction, there's a difference in land values that will then play into the market. So I guess from a community development perspective, one tries to not drive the need for people to get in their cars as much as possible. With that in mind, this is actually a retail operation, and as such, best located in commercial core areas. So if you look at the map, Councillor Whitmarsh, then you will see that as an example, the Gloucester industrial area is not included. So industrial has not been deemed to be part of the commercial intent of the policy.
Okay, so maybe just to just further on that line, when I'm looking, for example, and maybe where I see the biggest discussion around this, for me at least, is in the Aldergrove applications. So when I look at the map, I have sort of the page 25, I guess, of the presentation that you did, and I see the various applications. Like, the vast majority of the ones in Aldergrove are not in the commercial core, but they are located really in commercial areas, and I'm trying to distinguish between what's commercial core and what's commercial. It seems like they're definitely in commercial areas, but maybe not in the commercial core. And I look at the number of applicants, like it looks like 6 out of 8 might be outside of the commercial area. And yet when you go there and drive by them and look at them, they're very much commercial. They're very much retail. They certainly are a long ways away from schools or residential. And so I'm just trying to get my head around what we mean by commercial, and particularly in the Aldergrove. And I don't know if you have anything that would help to enlighten the thinking around commercial, and maybe particularly in Aldergrove, when most of them are falling outside, but definitely are in a retail kind of area.
Thank you, Your Worship. With your permission, there's a table that really should be looked at, viewed in conjunction with the map that Councillor Whitmarsh just referenced. The table, if you're looking at the slide package that was provided, or the report, it summarizes the applications that are not located within the commercial center of each of the neighborhoods or the communities. And it's not actually, with respect to Aldergrove, it shows that only 2 of the 8 are located within the commercial core. Keeping in mind the fact that Aldergrove and perhaps some other communities, such as, say, Willowbrook have commercial cores as opposed to commercial designations in the plan. So again, this reflects the fact that the policy discusses or identifies the need for such uses to be in commercial areas, as opposed to and distinct from light industrial, office, or heavy industrial areas, which in the case of Alder Grove, it's essentially the area west of 264th Street for the most part.
Right. Okay. I think that's helpful to know. And I haven't looked at the chart. I'm looking at the chart, and it does show that 7 out of 7, or sorry, all of the applications, so 8 out of 8 are in commercial designated areas, but not in the commercial center. Only 2 are. And so they get a 6 out of 7 instead of a 7 out of 7. So I guess I want to be careful that we're not, as a council, going to forward only those applications that are, 7 out of 7, because it seems like they definitely are in commercial areas. Anyways, okay, I don't want to belabor it, but that's an important thing. My second question is around the car bolt exchange applications. There are 3 in the car bolt exchange area. I'm just getting to there. So I'm looking on, I guess, page 16. This is the map. What I'm wondering on this one, and I noticed that we have 3 that are applications from Carbolt, and we have 1 application in Walnut Grove, and yet one of them, the one that's on 88th and 203rd, I think it's the Reading Projects Limited is the company. I think the name, they're going by Cheeky is the name. That particular one falls in both Walnut Grove and in the Carbolt Exchange. When you look at the map, it's actually sitting on the green area, falling right inside Walnut Grove, but it also falls inside the Carbolt Exchange. There seems to be an overlap between the Carbolt Exchange and Walnut Grove. And I'm wondering, and it certainly would be my recommendation, but I guess I'd like to have thoughts maybe as well from staff on why they wouldn't consider it maybe as a Walnut Grove application. Particularly what it would do is it would give us 2 applications from Walnut Grove to get feedback on, as opposed to only 1 automatically going forward. And then we would have 2 in Carbolt, 2 in Walnut Grove, and seeking public input on both. So I guess my question to staff is, why is it placed into Carbolt as opposed to Walnut Grove when it sort of fits in both? Was it just a flip of a coin, or was there a specific reason why it was chosen to go into Carbolt as opposed into the Walnut Grove designation?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Whitmarsh, as I attempted to outline the provisions of the plan, the policy, it discusses specifically Walnut Grove, as it does Willoughby, as it does the other neighborhoods that we've discussed. But then it talks about, in addition to that, I'm trying to find the actual wording, specific wording of the policy. Under 5.2 and 5.3 of the policy, here's the actual language, Your Worship. It may be beneficial for council. A limit of 1 cannabis retail store will be considered for approval for each of the urban communities in Alder Grove, Brookswood Fernridge, Fort Langley, Murrayville, and Willowbrook. A limit of 1 cannabis retail store will be considered for approval for each of Walnut Grove and Willoughby, except that an additional store may be permitted within 200th Street interchange area, as defined in Schedule 1 of the policy. So then we have 5.2 of the policy that talks about the 5. Then we have a recognition that the interchange area overlaps both Walnut Grove as well as Willoughby. So what staff has done, maybe council can correct staff, but what staff has done is the area that you can see on the map that relates to the 200th Street interchange has a heavy black outline around it. That area then has 3 applications within it. So those have been deemed to be the additional ones to the Willoughby and Walnut Grove areas. And as such, we end up with 3 in the 200th Street interchange area. But if council wishes to consider, I guess, a different way of considering the applications in the interchange area, then we could potentially, this would be the ramifications, we could potentially end up with 2 applications in Walnut Grove, 2 in Willoughby, and 1 in the Carbolt interchange area. because we have 5 altogether. We have 5 for Walnut Grove, Carball, Willoughby. What staff has done is determined the Carball area and excluded the applications outside of the area to be to Willoughby and Walnut Grove. And whatever's left inside of that would be then the applications within the 200 Street interchange area, those being the 3 identified.
Okay, that's helpful. It would certainly, you know, I think I'd like to hear from other members of council, but particularly in light of on that one application that falls into both of the areas, it would certainly be my recommendation to include it into the Walnut Grove area and have 2 in there for comparative purposes as well as public input. So that would certainly be a recommendation I would make. I'd have to think a little further about whether we take another one out of Carball and now include it into the Willoughby and have 2 in the Willoughby area. That's, I guess, another discussion, and hadn't thought as much about that because it seemed to be further away out of the direct Willoughby area. But that's really helpful, and I appreciate that. So I'll let other members talk, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Just briefly, Your Worship, before you move on to another member of council, the other thing that I wanted to mention is the fact that if you look at the geographic areas of all of our neighborhoods, Carball in particular is rather small in relation with Walnut Grove and Willoughby. And the reason why it was deemed by staff to warrant its own independent outlet, potential cannabis retail outlet, was because of the fact that it's within a frequent transit area. We have the proximity to the frequent transit at the interchange, the Carball Transit Exchange, and the designation of 200 Street as a rapid transit corridor, and the proximity to Highway 1. Because of its not its size, but because of its geographic location, it was deemed to be an addition to the other traditional neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Richter.
Yes, and thank you to staff for this presentation. I do have a number of questions, and most of my questions revolve around the whole idea of equity. And it seems to me, and I'll take Aldergrove as the case example, you've got 8 different companies in there that have put in applications and paid money to have the application forwarded. Now, what happens if we let them all go forward, which is what the batch processing option is, and they all come out with nobody has any complaints? How do we decide then? So it seems to me we have 7 criteria. So the applications that have 7 out of 7 should be the ones that are considered for moving forward because they've met all the criteria. And if there's more than 1 in an area with 7 out of 7, like there is in Carball, should we not be looking at a lottery system, like throw all 3 of those applications into a hat and pull 1, and that's the one that goes forward? And if the other 2 that did have 7 out of 7 don't get to go forward, shouldn't we be looking at refunding their application fees?
Your Worship, I don't know if this is a question for staff, but maybe just a quick note of clarification. The fees that have been submitted to date are really just the ones that relate to the rezoning process. The actual business license, which is the higher fees, if you will, have not been paid and will not be paid until such time as an applicant has actually made it through the land use matters issue process and is actually dealing with a business license. That is when the higher fees are applicable. Beyond that, at this point, it is just the fees that are associated with the, at least at the local government level, the ones that are associated with rezoning applications, with which applicants typically know is not a guarantee that they're going to be successful at the back end of it.
I know, but it still doesn't seem fair to me if you've got 9 people wanting, or 8 organizations wanting 1 outlet, and they're all paying fees and 7 of them are going to lose, shouldn't we be refunding those fees in some way? So from my perspective, the 5 options that are presented, I think there's one missing, and that's the lottery option. And the lottery option should be based on having a perfect 7 out of 7 criteria and go from there. The other question that I had relates to record checks, particularly regarding possible or past links to organized crime organizations. Now, you explained, Mr. Seffi, that there's 2 parallel systems running here. There's our rezoning system on one side. There's the liquor control and cannabis control system running on the other side. But the connections between the two don't seem really strong. So if we're processing an application and sending it through, and then it gets over to their side and they do a criminal record check, and it comes out that they're not eligible, do we bear any liability for not having required that check to have been done right at the beginning of the process?
Typically, Your Worship, I would be interested to find out if Mr. Backen has any comments, but typically until such time as third reading is granted, there is really no liability. And the intent is that applications will not be granted third reading, they'll be held post-public hearing. Once council has determined what the level of support from the public might be, it will then sit and wait until the fit and proper evaluation has been done by the province and then referred back to the municipality.
Okay, so let's look at the 3 in Carvalth as an example. And by the way, I don't agree with Councillor Whitmarsh that we should carve things off from Carvalth. I mean, Carvalth is Carvalth. And but if we looked at those 3 in Carvalth, all 3 have 7 out of 7. If they get sent forward to a public hearing and everybody's happy with all 3 of them, nobody's got any complaints, and the Liquor Control Board comes back and says they have no complaints, what do we do then? We have 3 applications for one area that have passed all the screening criteria. How do we choose at that point?
Your Worship, at that point, I think council obviously will hear from the public if council chooses to grant them first and second reading, and potentially as part of that process, there will be a level of understanding, engaging, if you will, of public support that might be leaning towards one applicant over the other, whether it's to do with the application, the applicant, the geographic location, technical considerations, the other parameters that the applicant has put forward. If equally they're all coming out of that process, the public hearing process, all the same, then again, council has the prerogative to always determine if 1, 2, or all 3 are going to proceed. But I suspect, and then let the market decide, but I suspect that as part of the public hearing process, council is likely going to hear whether the public prefers one over the other or not.
Yeah, well, I mean, they could all be competing with each other to get the most letters in that they can too. Like, how do we know we're getting valid input at that stage? But it's still, I still don't understand how we answer the question. In the final analysis, if there's only one going in there and we have 3 applications that have passed all the criteria and the screening and everything else, how do we decide which one of the 3, or do we give all 3 of them a license to operate in that area? Well, that goes against our policy. It seems to me we're missing some sort of a critical step in this decision-making process. The other comment I wanted to make, based on some of the feedback that's come in already, I think the one on 72nd Avenue is problematic and should not be proceeding. I don't think it's fair to the applicant to continue through to a public hearing. And clearly, there are considerations about access to children in the area. So again, I'm just wondering, I'm confused that these criteria and this process is not clear enough for us to proceed in good faith. I think we have to step back at some point and have more of an understanding and a decision made on what's going to happen. And looking at Aldergrove, to me, that's, 8 applications. None of them have 7 out of 7. 2 of them have 6 out of 7. The rest of them have 5 out of 7. So what do? Knock the 5 out of 7s off and just look at the 2 6 out of 7s? But the 2 6 out of 7s aren't even a perfect score of 7 out of 7. Anyway, those are my observations. I just have one more question I'd like to ask too. What controls does the municipality have, if any, around the whole idea of if this process has gone through and we have awarded a license to a particular organization for a particular community, how do we ensure that they're just not gonna flip and sell their license to another business that's maybe part of a big national chain, as an example?
Your Worship, as outlined in the presentation, we have a dual role, if you will, or two parallel sets of responsibility. One is to do with the land use that runs with the land. The other one relates to commentary and referral from the province, the Liquor and Cannabis Control Branch. Now, as far as the first one's concerned, once the land is zoned, it takes an act of council or the act of the landowner to amend the zoning. So it essentially runs with the land. So if it has a provision to provide for cannabis retail operations, that will remain in there until such time as council decides that it should be amended to something else, and then go through the prerequisite readings as well as the public hearing. As far as the change of ownership is concerned, then, or the change of operator, that is always subject to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulating Branch, because similar to liquor licensing, if you will, if an applicant wishes to, sell that, I'm using quotation marks in the sell, if somebody wishes to sell that to another individual, it must be approved by the general manager of Liquor and the Cannabis Control Branch. So it's not without the process, it is not up to them to do that at their own discretion. And then the Liquor and Cannabis Regulating Branch has to go through the same process of determination of fit and proper determination assessment to decide whether they're going to grant the approval for the selling of the license to somebody else or not.
Okay, I understand that. I guess maybe the question that I'm really trying to ask here is, we are only going to have, theoretically, 8 of these in the township, correct?
That's what the policy states, but it's not binding council to that decision. Council can go with more or less.
All right, well, if we only have 8 in the township, let's assume we stick to our policy. How do we make sure that the 8 don't end up all being owned and controlled by one conglomerate that in effect now has a monopoly in Langley? That's one of the concerns that I have. But thank you very much for your answer to those questions. I appreciate it.
Councilor Ferguson.
Thank you. I think staff has done a little bit to help make my information a little bit. You can see I've got about 100 and maybe 200 pages of my own notes, and I broke down the report into sections, and staff has done an awful lot of that. But I did want to make sure that staff at the and perhaps yourself, Mr. Mayor, at the end of this presentation, or maybe next time, that we're given an exam on item number 1, the process outline, municipal versus provincial jurisdiction, and that's liquor cannabis regulation, and how the rules play, and where we come in and where the province come in, because it's needless to say, it's a complicated system, and this is all new to most of us. And I think with 9 council members, I guess one is not here right now, 8 councilmen, you're gonna have 8 different opinions. Certainly looking at it. I also wanted to use the example that when we're looking at development applications and form and character, that depending on who the architect is, we'll get a litany of information to see what the applicant's going to do, what kind of fascade, what kind of colors, what the premises, the square foot of the premises, if they're a condominium or a townhouse or a family home, you know, what they're offering as far as amenities within their community, within their development, and some have kind of grade A type of relationship with our staff and council, and some don't have that grade A. And depending on how long they've worked with the community otherwise. And those are kind of things, what kind of amenities, what kind of community support, what kind of family ownership or family property ownership, and a number of those things. And we have to, as other members of council have already said, we have to be open and transparent, and we have to be also fair. Now, to the other things that have been mentioned here, you know, it's interesting how that you've got one of the criteria. One of our criteria is the fact it's a location to another community. And it's funny, I just drove by again today, and you know, the city of Surrey, and you know, it's an ongoing basis. The city of Surrey is building almost on our roads in Langley Township, a huge development of commercial in Campbell Heights, and that's just a going concern. They don't ask us if we're going to build or ask us what they're going to do, but it's a huge impact on our community. Certainly huge compared to what we're doing right here. So I always look at it the days where Delta and Surrey were fighting for commercial space around, and still continue to be on Scott Road. So that's another question I would have, and if we were to say, you know, we want to follow that guideline, which is fine, it's up to council. Another community, Abbotsford or Surrey or Langley, say, you know, well, fine, we'll put ours right on the border, and that'll be fine with them. So, you know, it's important to, you know, look out for our community first and our amenities and what people are offering and how they relate accordingly. You've also, if I may, through to staff, the 5 recommendations, are they based within all the criteria that report and all the criteria of the liquor cannabis distribution system, or are they basically just upon our report, if I may, through chair to staff?
Yeah, well, it depends on which ones council decides to proceed with. As an example, if council decides to go with first come, first serve, then while it does meet one of the objectives of the policy, which is to follow past practices with respect to how we process applications, it may not be, I guess, universally loved, because by its nature, it's going to allow the first ones in to get processed and likely get their rezoning approval from council, and then as such close the door in essence to other ones. So that is something that is worthy of mention and bearing in mind.
And also, I want to kind of more of a question is more direct than anything else. One of the criteria, if I may, if I've got it correctly, again, we just saw the five today. One of the criteria was just to throw all of them to public hearing and proceed accordingly, unless we decide on some today. Is that correct?
Your Worship, that's not a criteria. That's an option that council could choose.
An option, yeah.
Yeah, that's an option. Yes.
Okay. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, I think that there's an awful lot of discussion that has to take. We're going to have 8 different opinions on how to do things. I thank staff for all the work done, and I also like the fact that they put some charts together, which are way better than my charts, because I had to break through the numbers, application numbers accordingly. So I appreciate what they've done. And I think the recommendations, they give us 5 choices. I think that's important too. Thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, it's going to make sure you can hear me since it's my first time speaking. Can everybody hear me? The first time speaking? Yeah, okay. So I just had a couple of questions, and maybe I'll leave some of my other stuff for the council debate. Just a question through to staff, Mr. Mayor. I just want to get caught up a little bit. I want to remind council that at the time I was deemed to potentially be in conflict with the main policy, and so I didn't participate in the discussion around the formation of the initial policy that's led us down this. So I wanted to revisit some of those assumptions that are leading to what I think are some pretty significant issues with this process. And what the rationale was for 8 stores within the township of Langley as opposed to 1 or 2, and where this came from, that we have to or should be looking at proceeding with some that have no competition in their local areas. I don't accept the assumption that we should end up with 8 cannabis retail stores in the township of Langley. So maybe I could get a brief reminder of where that logic came from originally.
I'll turn it over to Mr. Secretary. I just think to be clear to council, council can approve 8, they can approve more, they can approve less. It is up to council, the policy that the guideline we came up with. But Mr. Secretary, you can provide a little more information. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. The restriction reflects directly what the public asked for. This was based purely on public input, but also reflects what other municipalities had done prior to the policy in Langley being developed. So it was not uncommon, also reflected the public advice and public input.
Okay, so I mean, I can go back and look at that. I'm still getting caught up. I pulled out some of that public engagement from last year, I believe. So I will go back and look at that while the debate continues. I also wanted to sort of echo some of Councillor Richter's comments regarding equity with some of the conversations I've had with some of the proponents. I don't really know what the criteria is going to be to start picking who wins and loses in this. So maybe a lottery. I mean, I'm a Survivor fan. Maybe we should see who can make fire first. I mean, I really don't understand where, how I'm going to go back to the 6 or 7 other people in Aldergrove and say that their applications were not accepted. For what basis, I have no idea. I also have some concerns around some of the, Councillor Davis mentioned lobbying, and Councillor Ferguson mentioned grade A relationships with council. And I'm getting a little uncomfortable that that's going to determine the outcome. I know that there has been some lobbying going on with some specific people with great connections to the council. And so I have some concerns that it's going to turn into whoever has the best lobbyist. But I'll leave those comments for later, Mr. Mayor, and those are the only question I had for staff. Thanks.
You're muted, or we're not hearing you. I'm sorry. You're muted, so it could be one of your settings.
Sorry, are you talking to me? I can't hear you. Sorry.
Oh, really?
It's a mutual problem. I'll carry on. Thank you.
Okay, you're on.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, as has already been stated, I want to thank staff for putting this very comprehensive analysis together. I think the framework that we've developed is fairly robust. When looking at it, I guess these are just more comments rather than something substantive. I've already pre-selected based on council potential policies going forward, which one I would prefer to help to pre-vet and move this process forward. I guess some of the comments around this are partly concerning to some degree, just because of the novelty that we have a new policy, and we want to be, I think, fairly conservative and very reflective of the fact that we want to be very vigorous and do a lot of due diligence to make sure that we are situating businesses that are going to be appropriate for neighborhoods. And so I think that from my point of view, that we've done a really excellent job in creating empirical information. So timelines, does it meet the criteria, and we can give it a numerical score. But for me, looking over these and trying to synthesize a pattern forward for myself, what I recognize is that in the end, there has to be some subjectivity. I cannot look at this process and say, if 5 different applicants came forward and they all had a 6 or 7 score, how could I then make a determination? Because in fact, I think that will likely be necessary, similar to how we make determinations about any other applications going forward. We get a report, and if it's a development proposal, we look at it and we make a determination about whether or not we think that it's appropriate for the community based on our understanding of what that looks like. So for me, I think that in the end, I don't want to get to the point where we overanalyze this, because I think we need to assure ourselves that council discretion is definitely going to play a role in this. And so I'm personally quite comfortable in making those kind of determinations. I mean, if council supports drawing something out, I guess that's fine. But, for me, I feel that the reason that I'm here making decisions is because I've been entrusted to do that. And so if I feel comfortable about that, I'm ready to move forward with the process, have it fair and equitable. I'm not too concerned about excessive lobbying, just because I think if there's a scarce resource to be had, that's just going to happen in any event. And I feel also comfortable in being able to support whatever decision that I make. So those are just my personal views. I'm looking forward to bringing this one step closer to being finalized and finding out, most importantly, what the public has to say. I think that's really the missing component, the key ingredient to all of this discussion. And I know we're going to have that, but I think a lot of things will become more clear once there is an opportunity to hear from the public through our engagement process to find out what they would be supportive of in their community. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From all members of council, Councillor Long, did you want to add any comments before we try and bring together what everyone said and we can move forward some sort of a decision point? Councillor Long?
Well, I want to be respectful. When I heard the term lottery, I can't be supporting putting names in a hat and pulling them out. If we're going to do that, I guess we'll do that with everything on council. But it's a tough decision, but I'm leaning towards B4, if that means anything. That way staff can make the decision and we can ratify it if need be. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for those questions and comments, council. As was pointed out by Councillor Ferguson, eight people, 8 different opinions, but at the end of the day, it's council that'll make the decision. I know it's been mentioned how difficult this can be and how do we do it? We do a lottery, we have to make a decision, but we make decisions all the time. And I think the public are looking to us to make a decision, and how we base that decision is really up to each individual member of council. And at the end of the day, it'll be the will of council, the vote here today. And how do we move forward from this point is really what we're struggling with. Staff have given us some options. That doesn't mean that that's the only options, or other options or combinations of those options to move forward. But at the end of the day, I think we do have to get some first and second readings onto our agenda based on some sort of criteria that we can move forward and have the public provide their input. And I think it's important. There's been mentioned one member of council that some have had we call it lobbying. I don't call it lobbying. It's information. It's great to hear what others are doing. If those want to reach out, I've always been open to the public, and so many members of council. But I think council should all have that opportunity, and if council would agree, when we do, however we make the selection to go forward to first and second reading, that at the public hearing, that the proponents have an opportunity to provide us with a presentation, so we all have an equal opportunity to hear what they have to say. It's almost like, because this is the first for us, it's not like a gas station is going to come in and ask for rezoning for a gas station when we have had gas stations here for many, many years. We're now, it's a lottery. Is how we're going to choose that one business for that one area. Perhaps in the future, there'll be more. Today, we have to choose the ones that will go forward to the province. So council will have to make that decision, and each member of council will have to come to their own way of making a decision. It might be that you're going to see 3 and you'll have your own little lottery and pull a name out of the hat to determine your vote. There's nothing wrong with that if they're all tied in your mind, but ultimately it's up to us. So one thing is to allow the successful proponents who get to public hearing, who do pass first and second reading, that they get an opportunity to present to council, give them 5 or 10 minutes, have the public input, let them respond to the concerns, and then we move on to the next one. It'll give us an equal opportunity to hear what they have to say for those who want to. That's one option. I'm not saying it's the only one. The other thing is I've heard just go with the 7 out of 7s and approve those to go forward, and I think that's valid, and because they have met a policy criteria. And the other is maybe we take the 7 out of 7s and 6 out of 7s. It gives council some of that discretion to say, okay, the one check mark that they didn't make, is that a real deal breaker, or is that something maybe they're on the edge of a boundary within a few feet? But staff have done a good job to come up with their criteria and say inside this circle, this is where daycares are, and they're a few feet inside. So maybe council needs to take a second look at that, and they may come out as a stellar applicant for some reason or another. I don't know, and that they apply. So one option for council is to ask staff to bring forward the 6 out of 7s and the 7 out of 7s to public hearing, or to first and second readings. We can determine then, and then go to public hearing. And at that point, we do have to make that decision, and it will be the will of council who moves forward to the province for their process. So not easy. There are options that staff have presented, and trying to bring together what everybody has said and all the concerns that we have. One thing I would put forward, if council is amenable to it, is that we ask staff to bring forward the ones that did score 6 out of 7, 7 out of 7 to council for first and second reading, and to refer the others back to the proponents to, if those others wish to come forward after the process. If we don't select somebody, I don't know. This is something I'm throwing out to council. That may be one way of doing it. Bring those forward for first, second reading. We then take it to the process where we do hear from the public. And I know Councillor Richter referred to one where we've been receiving a lot of emails, but that's a process where those emails and that input would come to council through an official manner that we all, in the public, all have the ability to, we'll have the ability to weigh it in a process that is fair to all. And I think that's what we could keep in mind. We somehow keep this fair to all, but staff have done a good job in taking the policy and honing it down and giving us check marks and giving us a criteria. We could do it one step further and just say, okay, that's the ones that scored 5. Sorry, you're not going to go forward to first and second reading. We're going to go with 6 and 7s, and then council gets that opportunity. So my thoughts, I'll open it up again to how do we move this forward? Councillor Richard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just wanting to make sure that I understood what you just said. So are you saying of the 20 applications that we've got in front of us right now, any one of those that scored a 6 out of 7 or a 7 out of 7, they should all go to
they would go to council for first and second reading. Council still has the opportunity at first and second reading to say no to one at that point. I'm just saying bring them forward to first and second reading. If we do move it forward, it goes to public hearing. That at least gets this ball moving. We get those forward. The other point I forgot to mention is that at first and second reading, staff can then determine with public hearing, rather than having a public hearing where they're all going to come, we're going to get bombarded in one evening with everybody. It could be split up over several nights. Mr. Back and I have spoken about that. That staff would come back with a recommendation on how we would deal with this, but we don't want to delay it so long that this never gets done. Have something come back to council first, second reading, schedule public hearings that we can consider all of them appropriately, and then they'll come back to third reading. So that's kind of what my thoughts were, Councillor.
Okay, so what you're suggesting then is the 3 in Carvals that all got 7 out of 7 should all come forward and go through the public hearing process, and then we decide which one we're going to pick. Like, shouldn't we have some sort of an idea of how we're going to narrow it from 3 down to 1?
My suggestion is that we hear from the proponents, if they wish to give a short presentation at the public hearing, if council does pass for second reading. So there still is that step they have to go through. Let them go to first and second reading. Council endorses first and second reading. And if council is amenable to this at the public hearing, allow each proponent some time to present to council. It's almost like we're doing an interview. It is a difficult one. It's the first time. We have 3 there that might all be equally great. They're all great proponents. When you read their own proposals, they sound fantastic. But how are we going to determine it? So having that process where they're allowed to present to council, we can ask some questions, we can then hear from the public, let them respond, and then we have at least everyone is on the same page and getting information And it might help to make that decision clear is all I'm suggesting.
Okay, so, but when you're saying that the proponents are going to make, so again, and I'll zero in on the 3 in Carvalth,
Yeah, sure.
because they're all 7 out of 7. So we're going to get 3 presentations from 3 different proponents at first and second, or at public hearing?
I would suggest at public hearing, but that's up to council. I'm throwing this out as a way to get, us all on the same page. We could ask them to do a presentation prior to. That's a good suggestion too. Or we could do it at public hearing when it's up to council. I'm throwing out some suggestions.
Okay. I'm still not sure, because anything else that comes in front of us for 3rd reading, once it's had first and second and public hearing, if all the criteria have been met, we're pretty much obligated to let it go forward.
Not at 3rd reading, at 4th reading we generally are. At 3rd reading, council still has a discretion. So based on keeping an open mind through the public hearing, based on what you would have determined and what I've determined and every other member of council, we will each make our own mind and we can vote accordingly. And then at the end of the day, it's the vote of council.
Okay, but this is where I'm getting confused, because if we've got the 3 Carvalths come through and the 3 Carvalths get a 5-4 vote at 3rd reading, and 3rd reading is approval in principle on a rezoning, we have in effect said we're going to allow 3 different venues in Carvalth, because they each got a 5-4 vote, which is a majority vote, and on 3rd, that's approval in principle. Like,
you're correct, because council does have the discretion to approve more than the 1. As Mr. Duffy has said, there's a policy.
I don't think that's fair. I think we need to make the decision before we send things through to first, second, and public. It should just be 1 going through for each area.
Okay. And
if that blows up, then we look at another one.
Yeah.
But thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, that's great. We could do it at first and second reading, but who do we send to first, second reading? We're going to make a decision based on, based on this, or we're going to at least hear from the public. And I think we have to give that stage.
Yeah, but what I'm concerned about is we have a policy that says 1 per area.
Yeah.
And we're going to end up with 3 per area or more. In Aldergrove, we could have 8 per area. Like,
I know.
We need to screen this before we do first and second.
Comments. Thank you. No, it's just up for discussion. Thank you. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, I just want to raise a procedural item for you, Mr. Mayor, while you consider motions, that if we were to consider them all in a bulk form, to go to first and second reading or public hearing based upon, again, some criteria I'm not really understanding. I just want to make sure that we maybe look at dividing out the Fort Langley items, or unless there's a desire to have me in conflict, I don't have to deal with this. But the idea would be I would need some consideration to separate out the Fort Langley items based upon what's going to happen. So maybe Mr. Backen, can you please advise myself and potentially the chair on the latest and greatest information in this regard?
As far as, well, I think I can help it.
Because I think it might be helpful just to get this out of the way now.
Right. Yeah, so again, it's up to each individual member of council to determine if they're in conflict. If it's certainly one part of the motion would put you in conflict, then we definitely would divide it, and that would be absolutely no problem at all.
Okay, so I just advise you in front.
Divide those out. So
yeah, when we consider any of the Fort Langley items, that I would be in conflict on those, considering them either way. As per legal advice. Next thing, I think this conversation is kind of highlighting that this process is just not working. Needs to be revisited, in my opinion. And unfortunately, I wasn't part of the original discussions that sort of set us down this direction. I'm not going to belabor it too much, but I think that maybe, Mr. Mayor, there would be some helpful decisions we could make. So, for example, I would be of the opinion that the location at 72nd and 208 is not ideal. Located adjacent to Milner Heights, I would look at maybe stopping that one. I also see no interest in my mind I see no need for a cannabis location in the heart of Murrayville. I'm quite fine to consider them potentially at Carvalth or on 88th and Walnut Grove, for example, or commercial strip mall locations in Aldergrove, but I don't see the need. Again, I'm not accepting this assumption that we need 8 locations. And I certainly don't see a need for it in Murrayville if we're going to have one at Willowbrook and then at the interchange, potentially in Aldergrove as well. So I don't see the need for that one on its face. But again, we sort of set down this path that we're going to head in the direction of 7 or 8. But if we're going to send them on as a group, I wouldn't be supportive of that if they include some of these items. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Good comments. And again, just to reiterate, that's what this meeting is all about. There's a process here that council has approved, but that's what this meeting is about. To have a discussion, come up with a way forward. Whether we say just take 7 forward, or I'm fine with anything. I'm just trying to come up with something that will work, that will be fair to the proponents, is fair to the public, and that council is on the same page, getting the same information. And at the end of the day, each one is on its own merits and can be voted down. But certainly good discussion, and that's all we're looking forward to. Councillor Ferguson? And also we're looking forward to getting some next step. We can try and get a next step out of this meeting. Councillor Ferguson? You're muted. Councillor Ferguson, I think it's your headset that is interfering again.
Is that any better yet?
Yeah, that's better. I can hear you now. Thanks.
Okay. So I want to quick question to staff. We have, as a council, can either accept none of them or 8 of them. Is that our policy? Is that what we're able to do, if I may, through the chair, staff?
The policy states that we will consider 8 different ones in 8 different geographical areas of the township. Council has the discretion to vote for all 20 of them, whatever there is, or none of them, and in between.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, because Councillor Woodward did bring up, and it's the first I've heard of it, kind of a less, because I noticed I'm reading in the Abbotsford News that Abbotsford is going with 4. Yeah. Although they have 10 areas selected for the future, but they're going with 4 right now. And from what I understand, that one of the ones they rejected was an application in Abbotsford called Cheekies, in which we've got one as well. But that'll be up to us to decide what we want to do. My question is, I'm going back to Aldergrove and taking out the criteria or revisiting the criteria of not locating within 200 meters of municipal border, which I find odd. And also, where does the commercial center of Aldergrove begin and when does it end? I know is the Save On Foods part of Aldergrove? Is what they used to be Safeway Fresh Start, is that part of Aldergrove? They're all commercial uses. I was just wondering if I may, either through the chair or to ask staff where Aldergrove starts and the commercial car and where it ends, if I may.
Just a second, refer to that map.
I can help you there if you like, Mr.
So 7.
Sorry, was somebody else trying to speak, Your Worship?
No, Mr. Secretary, please go ahead. Just answer to the Council Ferguson's question.
Yeah, Your Worship, the committee plan, the Aldergrove committee plan designates the commercial area within the core area plan.
Yeah, okay, I realize that. So it's a lot of people would get confused by that. And if you look at the map, whatever the page, you don't have page number. It's called the Aldergrove applications. Under what you've mentioned, Mr. Mayor, both the Burb, Lafleur, and I guess Cheekies, but I guess that'll be up to us. They would actually get 6 out of 7s if they took that not located within 200 meters, and if they included the fact that that's actually a commercial use within Aldergrove, as is Fresh Start and also Save On Foods. The last time I went there was a commercial use. Then actually, Burb and Lafleur would get 7 out of 7s. Anyway, I was just looking at, and also the Janda, which is Cheekies, would get 6 out of 7. So I was just trying to be fair within the way we look at things. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yes. So just following what you had mentioned, Mr. Mayor, on this, on going through the 6s and 7s. By my calculation, and not considering the comments that Councillor Ferguson made, which make some sense around the 200-meter boundary, that would reduce it down to 13 applications total. I equally have reservations around the one that's on 72nd and 208, just because of its proximity to residential. You know, I think there is some merit to reducing the number like that, and it does have a way of at least reducing and getting to a more reasonable number. If we were to remove the criteria that Councillor Ferguson has suggested, we'd be sitting at, I think, 16 applications. And that would at least start to reduce some of the number down. But it is challenging, I think, even with 16, a number of 16 first and second readings on 16 applications. So that's just some comments. I did mention early on, you know, I still, you know, feel like I appreciate the comments from staff around the 3 that are in Carbolt, but it does seem to me that one of them is not like the other. It's a bit of a Sesame Street thing in terms of location, and it feels like it's much more Walnut Grove than it is in Carbolt. So, I mean, I would like to see us consider, at least as council, and let's see what council thinks on the matter. And if, I don't know if it takes a motion or not, but that's to consider that we would have 2 in Carbolt and then move the one that's actually also in Walnut Grove and consider it as a Walnut Grove application.
Councillor Long.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Well, first of all, maybe I can clarify the boundaries of our towns. You know, prior to 1990, there was no commercial development or retail development outside of the core of Aldergrove. So if you look at the plan, it starts around where the CPO is. There's a sign that says, "Welcome to downtown Aldergrove." And then it goes up to Butler's and Sons, which is just before Willow Creek. So that is the downtown core of Aldergrove, has been and always will be. So there's that about it. But in terms of this notion of removing the 200-meter boundary, let me remind you that the boundary between Aldergrove and Abbotsford is one street. And on one side of the street, there's a commercial mall that's used to be Safeway, now Fresco. And on the other side of the street, there's a bit of a mall there with a Starbucks and a gas station and so forth. And then just a few meters down, you know, I guess a few dozen meters down towards the east, there's a strip mall that's been built there too. So I really think that maybe staff could emphasize again why that is in there. And I certainly find it to be very helpful to have that boundary stipulation of 200 meters, because in the case of Aldergrove, you could have a pot shop on each side of the street of 276 quite easily. So there's a concern I have about that. And I wonder if staff could also, if you wouldn't mind, rather than us doing it, Your Worship, if they could tell us again why we had these multiple locations. You know, from my perspective, we have 7 fairly distinct communities, almost an 8th emerging with this Carbolt. But maybe they could talk a bit more about walkability and so forth, so that people that are in Murrayville wouldn't have to drive all the way to Willowbrook or Aldergrove, should they require something. But also, you know, in terms of these boundaries, Your Worship, it should be pretty clear where the boundary of Walnut Grove is, and if it overlaps into this new undefined Carbolt area, you know, can staff explain that? Because there must be a line that says this is Walnut Grove and this isn't, and if there's an application within that line, as Council Whitmarsh says, it's in Walnut Grove, happens to be also in this newly defined Carbolt area, but it still is, quote unquote, in Walnut Grove. So can we get some clarity from staff, Your Worship, on those boundaries and why that criteria was set in? One, on why one of the scores was not to be on a boundary, and number 2, why they chose the communities as they did.
Sure, and just to be clear, and just so we can clarify, is that the Carbolt exchange is one is in Carbolt, in the circle they call it, or the 200th Street exchange, happens to be Walnut Grove, and you prove that one, and you prove another one in Walnut Grove. I understand that you could approve both, because one's in one, you know, there's an overlap there. So, Mr. Secretary, just add some further clarification.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, Your Worship, the policy was created based on council direction following public input. It reflects what public stated. The public asked for a limited number, a restriction around how many of these we will have. They also said that they would ideally be located in the commercial cores of each neighborhood. That then went into the policy that council adopted. The proximity to another municipality's boundary is not in the policy. That was a question that was asked, I believe, at a council meeting when this topic was being discussed, and staff decided to include that as an additional selection criteria. It just provides another piece of information for council to consider as an application is being considered for first and second reading. It is not the governing criteria. It is yet another piece of information that might help a member of council with their individual decisions. The policy clearly outlines the boundary of each neighborhood plan area. That is, for the purpose of the policy, not necessarily the same as the Committee of Neighborhood Plan. For Alder Grove, it clearly outlines the area, which I think Councillor Long was just referring to as being the traditional historic downtown core of Alder Grove. The policy reflects that, and even though there may be other areas that are in the Alder Grove Community Plan designated as commercial, for the purpose of this policy, they're not included because they do not form the historic downtown commercial core of Alder Grove. And as I said before, as far as Carvalho is concerned, it is because of the fact that it is recognized as a frequent transit development area. Because of that, council has just been given the additional flexibility discretion, if council so chooses, to allow another application to go in that area. It is in addition to one for Walnut Grove, one for Willoughby. If council wishes, council can change that and not have another one for interchange and limit it to the 7. But it's just another piece of information to help council guide and help council make its decision.
So, Your Worship, though, if you don't mind, so why is that one, which seems to be within the Walnut Grove boundary, would it not be considered to be in both Walnut Grove and part of the Colville frequent transit? Would that not be correct?
Yes,
well, I think the question would arise, Your Worship, as to which one is it? Why is staff giving us an application that falls on 2 areas? Which one are we going to choose? The fact is that it's in addition to what was previously outlined as Walnut Grove and Willoughby. When you look at the policy that relates to this issue, it clearly outlines the area that is the 200 Street interchange area. So if it falls in that area, we're calling it to fall within that area, not within Walnut Grove or Willoughby, but within that area, because that's what the policy says. The policy has a series of maps.
But that's unfair to that chap that happens to be in Walnut Grove and also part of the Colville, and it hands it over to the single one application that's left in Walnut Grove, does it not?
Well, I guess it's up to council to determine, Your Worship. It is if it's unfair or fair or part of the process or not. I guess one could argue that the date application was received should also be a factor, and why is an application that was received on the 30th of August being considered in competition with another one that was submitted in May of this year. So again, these are just relevant facts for council to consider as they're making this decision, which is clearly not an easy one, but it's just helping, hopefully, ideally, helping council to have several points of input, several pieces of information at their disposal as they're making this very difficult decision.
And finally, Your Worship, I just wanted my original question when I got sidetracked with all the boundaries and so forth was, is it not what we're trying to do now, decide which B option it is? Staff have presented the B1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and potentially a B6, which we could discuss. Would that not be the best way to proceed from here, is to pick one of those options to proceed with?
Yeah, I think so. It's just, this is a discussion to see which way we're going to go and throwing ideas out. But thanks for that. Councilor Richter is next to the question. I just want to say, this is a meeting of council. We can entertain motions by any member of council, and then we can debate those and vote on them, and it helps us to move forward. I've heard that there may be one application that kind of jumps out that might not be proper to move forward, and we can entertain any motion that we're to proceed by eliminating some which may seem obvious to some members of council that we don't include those, and then we can work it down. I've heard B4 mentioned a few times, but there's one that might be more amenable to some members of council, because then we're going to go back to the staff to come back with some, and it takes us, the politics out of it. So I'm just leaving it up for you for Council. Councilor Richard.
Yes, just a couple of comments. First of all, I don't understand why Carvolth is its own area, really. Why don't we just eliminate Carvolth? And then we've got 3 applications in Willoughby and 2 applications in Walnut Grove. So just get rid of Carvolth. The other comment that I wanted to make goes to what Councillor Long was saying with regards to 272nd, or not 272nd, 276 Station Road being the divider between Abbotsford and Township and Aldergrove. And if we put one right on the border there and there is an application, then one can go in right across the street in Abbotsford and there's nothing we can do. You know, basically we've got 2 venues serving the same area. Similarly, there's one of the Willowbrook applications is more or less right on the border with the city of Langley. And the same thing could happen there. So I also support having the setback from the municipal boundaries. I think it's really important in order to ensure that we don't over inundate a particular area with these venues through no fault of our own, except for the fact that our neighbors on the other side could be putting applications in there as well. So those are my comments, and I'd be happy to move a motion that we eliminate the Carvolth exchange area.
Certainly, we can accept that motion. Second, one thing to keep in mind is that you could, with the Carvolth there in Willoughby and Walnut Grove, you can still approve 3. If you take it out, then we're approving 2. So for that area.
Well, it seems to me that by having the Carvolth exchange in there, what we're really doing is doubling down for Walnut Grove and for Willoughby. They get to have twice as many because there's a separate little distinct area that's never really been acknowledged as a specific community up to this point within the township of Langley. So my motion stands. I move that we eliminate the Carvolth area as a standalone area and reassign the applications there to whether they're physically located in Willoughby or physically located in Walnut Grove.
So move.
So just to be clear, so we're not eliminating, we're eliminating, we're reducing the criteria from, what is it? Is it 8? That we have 8 down to 7 is what your motion would be to reduce the number of applications from, that are to be approved by council by this policy from 8 to 7 by eliminating the Carvolth or 200 exchange areas and so on. Is that your motion? Is that
well, I think that's a fallout of my motion, but it's not my motion. My motion is to eliminate Carvolth exchange area as a standalone area for these cannabis venues and reassign the applications in that area to either to the geographic area that they're located in.
Mr. Backen has a comment, please.
Yeah, Mr. Seppi, if you're there, I think I just want to clarify that because I think then the application regarding reading would move into the Walnut Grove area, but where would the Visco and the Willoughby Business Center applications move into? Could you perhaps elaborate on where they would fit?
They would go into Willoughby. They're in Willoughby. They're physically located in the community of Willoughby.
Councilor Richter, Mr. Backen asked Mr. Seppi a question. I'll allow Mr. Seppi to answer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just trying to dig up the map so I can share it on the screen. So I think that would be helpful because it sounds like we may be going towards a amendment to the policy potentially. So Your Worship, can you just show me your thumbs up? This is, you can see this map?
No, it was up momentarily. There we go.
Now I see the map.
Okay.
It's a nice sunset.
Yeah, now I see the map.
So, Your Worship, the policy shows a square, as you can see here on the screen, around the area known as the 200 Street Interchange or Carvolth. And it discusses the fact that there would be an additional one in this area, in addition to the area in green, being Walnut Grove, the area here, shown in red, being Willoughby. So I guess the question is, if the area around Karloff, if the black line here on this map was to be removed, what would happen? Then I guess there has to be an understanding or interpretation of that direction, that the Walnut Grove area would then be expanded to include this portion of the Karloff area north of the highway. And as such, the project application number 8, which is where I have my cursor now, would then be competing with application 16 as being the 2 in Walnut Grove. And the other applications, number 1, as you can see on the screen again, and number 17, would then be competing with number 10 as being in Willoughby. But again, just to remind council, the policy itself doesn't distinguish Walnut Grove or Willoughby, but rather the 200 Street interchange area, and identifies the commercial core of Walnut Grove as being in this area, which is where number 16 is. There's a box around here that identifies, again, for the purposes of this policy, as being the commercial center of Walnut Grove. So with that logic, if this was to be removed based on council direction, the policy around an additional outlet at the interchange, even though the reading project, which is the one that's being referenced, would then be within Walnut Grove, it would not rank, I guess it would not have the tick mark against, is it within the commercial core area? That would not be yes, it would be a no, because for Walnut Grove, this is the commercial area shown. You see, it changes things, Your Worship.
So, yeah, so this amendment to the policy. So if Councillor Richter wishes to move that, then Council can make a decision if they wish that to happen. So Councillor Richter, you put the motion on the floor to amend the policy to remove the Carwell area. I'm sorry, that's what I heard.
That is not the motion. That is not the motion I put.
Okay, what is the motion? I'm sorry, I misinterpreted that.
My motion was to move the Cheeky application into Walnut Grove and the other 2 into Willoughby.
Eliminate them.
No, I'm not eliminating them. I'm just moving them, the locations.
Yeah. Which would automatically happen by removing the 200th Street interchange area from the policy. So this is what they would then fall into those other areas. Is that correct, Mr. Secretary?
I'm not sure what it is you're asking, Your Worship. I think by moving application number 17, the one that the cursor is shown here, which is both appears on this map to be on Karloff, within Karloff, as well as Walnut Grove. By moving it to be only within Walnut Grove, it would then not be in compliance with the commercial designation requirements of the policy, because it would be outside. So even though it would be competing with another one in Walnut Grove, as opposed to with 2 more in Karloff, it would not be ranked 7 out of 7, but rather 6 out of 7.
So, Councillor Richter, if you want to make the motion,
no, you know what? This is just starting to become very clear to me that there's some sort of a vested interest around protecting that area. So I'm going to withdraw my motion, and I'm just going to vote against it.
Excuse me, I've got the floor. No, that's fine. I take offense that there's a vested interest. We're trying to, I think all of the members of council are trying to be impartial and give the proponents and the public equal opportunity. I don't appreciate that comment. I think I'm willing to entertain any motion. Certainly, just trying to get clarification on the motion before went on the floor, but accept the fact that you don't want to move it. We'll move on to the next question.
A point of order, Your Worship, though. It was moved and seconded.
It wasn't seconded. There was no seconder.
Yes, Councillor Davis seconded.
I didn't accept the seconder. We were in discussion. So, and Councillor Richter has asked that she didn't want it to go on. If it had been seconded, that's a different. I was still in discussion to try and understand what the motion meant exactly, and that's why staff had to provide some input because of the designation of the Carval and what that did to the policy. And it is an amendment to the policy, so we're trying to follow procedure here. Councilor Davis.
I could see, I know we're moving on. You're not accepting the motion, but Councillor Whitmarsh did bring up a point of moving the one project to 08. That would have solved, well, it would have solved the problem to move to, if you took the Carwolf away, but now it changes the check marks totals on everybody else. But I think I'm wondering if that Carwolf exchange area kind of is designed for the bus loop, and people can come down the freeway and do their shopping and stay on the highway, or I don't know. To me, if I was on the highway, I'd go to that area instead of Murrayville, because Murrayville's just to drive through Langley. Like, yeah, okay, that may have solved a few problems, but it does create other problems on total marking.
So this is the sorry for the interruption, but this is the map that is in the policy. As you can see, this is clearly identified as the 200 Street interchange area. It talks about Walnut Grove / Willoughby and 200 Street interchange area. It has an outline of what is deemed to be the commercial core for the purposes of the policy within Willoughby, and what is deemed to be, for the purpose of the policy, the commercial core of Walnut Grove. And then all of this, because of the commercial nature of all of this, and because of the frequent transit nature, again, as I discussed earlier, this whole area was considered to have the warrant for one more. So again, one around 80th and 208, one around 212 and 88 in Walnut Grove, and one around 200 Street and Highway 1.
Thank you. Councilor Davis.
Yeah, in the way we are, I'm not trying to get on the Councillor Long bandwagon, but and maybe I'm confused.
Why not?
Well, no.
And maybe we just need to have motions to move forward, and
yes,
council to come up.
That's what I was going to say. I'm
ideas here.
I don't actually have a motion.
To remove one. Now's the time to do it. Let's make a motion. That would help move us forward. I've heard some talk of them, but we need to have motions on the floor, and they need to be clear to staff. If they're amending the policy, where there's one thing to amend the policy, which we've discussed. And there's another thing. Another part of it is to say, okay, we want to move this one forward, or we don't want to move this one forward. That has to be a motion of council to give staff the direction. It also, and I know it's mentioned before, was one where we just, and Councilor Davis, you mentioned that, just let council, let staff come back to council with some criteria. Mr. Backen has a comment. Mr. Backen, turn off you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to try to wade in just to try to provide some clarity, perhaps, as to potential options for direction, because we've heard a lot about the issue of location. We've heard a lot about the issue of the grading. We've heard the requirement for there to be objectivity. So I'm going to let it set up perhaps a path council may entertain that might lead us to a point where we can advance things, and it may not. And it may have to require some modifications. But my first observation is that there seems to be some recognition that the applications that scored a 7 are worthy of going forward. There then seems to be a readiness to consider the applications that scored a 6. In some cases should go forward, the notable exception being the Willoughby application, which did score a 6. The other thing I've noted is that there seems to be a reluctance, and it's quite understandable, that the application scoring 5 or less perhaps should not go forward, but should be I guess, altered, changed, or modified to reflect the criteria council has put forward. So one path forward would be to simply move a motion that council advances all applications scoring a 7 to go to public hearing. The next step would then be entertaining an amendment or modification to include the 6, perhaps excluding those, rephrase that, those scoring 6, with the exception of the one for Willoughby, and then to confirm that those scoring 5 should be referred back to the applicants for them to consider meeting the criteria as established by council. that three-step process may help advance it, or it may not. There may be other areas, but I thought I'd interject with that to see if that satisfies any of the council desires.
You know, that,
So we'll go on to Council Whitmarsh, and it would be nice to get some next steps. I think Mr. Backen has summarized it nicely.
Your Worship, can I get some clarification what Mr. Backen just said?
So Mr. Backen suggested.
No, I understand, but why have we eliminated this number 10? The decision seems to have been made that it's no good.
Council Long, we haven't made any decisions yet. What we could do is 3 or maybe 4 steps. Number 1 is we all agree that 7 and 7 can go forward to public hearing, then we can hear from the public and move forward. If that's the case, we can do that. Then the 6s, we can look at the 6s, and there may be an amendment to remove 1 of them or 2 of them, I don't know. That can be done. And then the 5s, and there may be an amendment to conclude and say that the 5s no, but maybe you have an argument or someone has an argument to include 1 or 2 of them back in because of some of the points that you mentioned, and then they can be put back in as amendments. So there is a way forward, but it has to be direction of council. We have to really to give direction to staff. I think by motion is the most appropriate way. So hopefully that helps clarify. We can certainly entertain and go one at a time, but it does not preclude any member of council amending, say if we want to put all the 6s in or the 7s and amending it to remove 1 or 2 or 3 or all of them. I mean, that's up to council. We can go through our standard process of motions, and then council can vote and that gives direction to staff. It's the voice of council. That helps clarify. Councillor Whitmarsh, and you have a motion you'd like to put on so we get started.
I appreciate the comments from Mr. Back, and I think they'll be helpful as we go forward. But I think prior to doing that, I'd like to make a motion that we consider application 8, the reading project, as part of the Walnut Grove area. Keeping Carboth, I'm okay either way. I'm happy to keep Carboth, but that one to me should be a Walnut Grove considered application. I'd like to move that.
Seconded.
I'll second that.
Seconds it. So,
Arneson.
Sorry, Councillor Arneson seconds, yes. So the motion is on the floor, and there's hands up that are up to 4. So maybe those who wish to speak to the motion could just leave their hand up, and that'd be great. Councillor Whitmarsh, did you wish to speak to it?
Well, I guess I've already spoken about it. I think it fits in the Walnut Grove area. It already falls into that zone. It could have been either place. Staff chose to put it in Carboth. I think it fits in Walnut Grove. It will score at a 6 out of 7, as Mr. Steffi said. I understand that. Likely we'll consider 7s and 6s on our consideration, but it makes more sense. It's north of the freeway as opposed to south of the freeway, so I think it fits best in Walnut Grove.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Okay, well, I'm a little concerned here where we were earlier about removing the black line around Carboth. To me made more sense because that would automatically do what this motion is doing. It would mean that the number 8 would automatically be part of Walnut Grove, albeit that the scoring might change. And by removing the black line, the other 2 would become part of Willoughby. And as I said earlier, I don't understand. There seems to be a fait accompli that number 10 is going to be taken out of the books. I haven't been lobbied. Some on council seem to be very strong that number 10 is not appropriate, yet it's scored a 7. So it's unfortunate that motion didn't proceed by removing the black line. That would accomplish what Council Whitmarsh is trying to do here, and also accomplish another location that will be in Willoughby, because if number 10's eliminated, there won't be any in Willoughby. And I'd like to say this very clearly. It's been mentioned a number of times that this Carboth, new designation of Carboth, which is not really one of our neighborhoods, not on my list yet anyway, is in a frequent transit zone. Well, that's just, to me, a negative, because that means people are going to come in to our town, pick up whatever, and then go somewhere, get on the bus again. That to me has its negative sides to it as well. Is that really what we want? Is people to come here, pick up their requirements, and then travel around with it? I don't know if that's a safe thing to have. They'll be on the buses with this product, and could fall into the hands of anybody. So, and here we are trying to protect the youth and those in our community that are vulnerable. So I really still feel, I don't know where to vote on this motion because now you have entertained it, Your Worship, but I think it would have been a better solution to remove that black line around Carboth. And that would have solved what we're trying to do here right now.
This is the motion that's in front of us. So, Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. I think, I mean, again, I guess I'm just going to have to keep repeating myself. So we start a process with specific boundaries and a policy adopted by council that goes to the public, it goes to proponents. The individual further east in Walnut Grove proposed a location within the boundary of Walnut Grove as per that policy, paid the application fee, has been probably paying, maybe paying rent on this location this entire time, is now going to be subject to competition with the Carboth application, again, as originally proposed within the policy. So again, we're just changing it on all of these people at the time. I'm going to highlight that John Cameron is a lobbyist for this particular proponent trying to get relocated into Walnut Grove. I'm very uncomfortable with that as a lobbyist and his connections here. I'm very, very uncomfortable with how this is proceeding. I don't appreciate this process, and I find it just deeply unfair to a range of proponents where we seem to be coming down to whoever has the best lobbyist will be successful with their application. So I don't support.
Councilor Woodward, I think those comments are totally inappropriate. I don't know how that has a bearing on anything. And I wish you would not bring that up, because it could also be the reverse of people who don't like certain people are going to vote a certain way. So we're all trying to be fair with everyone, and bringing up citizens' names. I don't care who it is or who they support, who they don't support at one time or another. I've got friends all over this community. Maybe you don't, but I do have friends. But I'm trying to be impartial to them, because I'm not going to be voting on something because I have a friend who might like it. It's each one of us has to make a decision whether you like someone or you don't like someone. It should not be our criteria to vote. And I take offense to the fact that because you don't like someone, that might be.
I never said I didn't like anybody, Mr. Mayor. Speak for yourself, and I'll speak for myself, please. I find it very, very uncomfortable that we're heading down this road where we're making changes specific to specific proponents after everybody was given a framework to work with. I think I'm expressing a very rational, reasonable objection based upon the attempts to lobby me directly. So I don't appreciate your comments, Mr. Mayor, but let's proceed with the debate and we'll vote accordingly.
And that's what I've been asking all meetings, that we go by motion. Not everyone has to agree with everything, but this is a motion that's on the floor, and we can vote on it. And
please don't misrepresent what I've said, Mr. Mayor. I have not said I don't like anyone.
I don't know what your motives are, Councilor Woodward, and I take offense.
My votes are fairness and transparency, Mr. Mayor.
Well, that's mine too. So let's stick with that and keep citizens' names out of this, and let's just focus on the motions, try and move this forward in a manner that we'll be able to come up with a decision that is voted on by council, not by one or two people.
Okay, well, we can change it however we like then as we go along. That's correct.
Okay. Councilor Arnesen.
Oh, thank you, Worship. I supported this motion. I think that this is one of these situations where potentially it was my understanding that there may have been either a misunderstanding or different interpretations of the lines that we have drawn. And so for me, there is some pragmatism of looking at this particular application because it's on the same access in Walnut Grove. On 88th Avenue, I think that it's more similar from that perspective than it would be to look at Carvalth. And so I feel comfortable in putting those together, if for no other reason than I think that they are more easily compared to each other as options we may wish to support or not. So for me, it's not about, quite frankly, anybody who asked me to go see their application, I went because I thought I'm going to be better off knowing what the proponents have to say. And in any event, we're going to hear from them later, hopefully at any other events that we have for public engagement. But I just think that there's some rationality of allowing these to go together in Walnut Grove. Thank you.
Well, again, we're back into this inequity situation, because should this cheeky one end up being approved in the final analysis, and there's another one approved in Carvalth, then Carvalth's going to have two sources of cannabis within spitting distance of each other. So either you get rid of Carvalth, which I said earlier and nobody wanted to do, or you leave things the way they are. So I can't support this. I think this is just giving an unfair advantage to the Carvalth area, because it's going to end up having two venues, one to the immediate north, possibly, and the other one to the immediate south. Makes no sense.
Councilor Ferguson. Your headset's interfering again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I mean, we've gone over and over and over, and you know that's what this meeting is for today, to discuss cannabis retail, and I think it's up to all of us to find out as much as we possibly can. That's why I've got my breakdown of all the different places that I've read and all the different locations, and it's all here in my thing. 200 pages, and I've identified a phone staff. I phoned as many of the applicants that have phoned me. I've asked questions and asked questions of them. I've done site visitation. I've driven by locations. Now, I'm sure most of council already done that. I mean, it's similar to maybe a zoning or rezoning bylaw that we have to find out as much information prior to the conclusion of a public hearing as we possibly can, so we can make the best solutions and best vote according to the information we have. That's what I guess we were elected to do. I don't have any problem with this motion. If you look at a line on the map and look at the highway, certainly it makes sense for this particular project to go to Walnut Grove rather than anywhere else. Whether it goes past that, where they're able to provide enough points or enough evidence to us as councillors to get enough votes to proceed accordingly, that'll be up to the process. So I think it makes sense. So I'm going to support it. I think we should also practice a little bit more decorum. We all know many people in this community that our kids have played soccer or gymnastics or hockey or baseball or in the arts or all sorts of things. We bump into people at the grocery store. So, you know, if somebody lives in the community, owns something in the community, we're bound to know somebody. And so I think we just exercise a bit of decorum. Thank you.
Councillor Wong.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Are you there, Your Worship?
Yep. Here you go.
Okay. I dropped my gadget here. Okay. Well, as much as I'd like to, well, first of all, if we're going to move this one, then you're going to have to consider moving others and so forth. So I hate to say it, but I don't feel that that's going to work, because there could be some other movements happening. Although it's fairly unique to this, I'm not going to support it, but I am going to try again and put that motion forward that Councillor Richter did earlier, remove the black line, and that solves it, because we're going to have a problem in Willoughby as well. If number 10 is for some reason deemed unsuitable, then then the other two would become part of Willoughby, or there might be a motion coming forward to do that. So we have a motion now to move number 8 into Walnut Grove. Maybe there'll be another motion to move number 1 into Willoughby, or number is it 30? No, number 17. So maybe council can think about that I'll be not supporting this, but I will be, again, trying the motion to remove the black line. You know, we have 7 distinct communities. We're the community of communities. And if Carvolth is going to be a distinct community, I guess we should have a discussion about it. But as far as I'm concerned, we have 7. And we have 7 neighborhoods, and I guess 7 stores makes sense. So this 8th and one doesn't make sense to me. So I'm going to vote against this, but with the hope that we can bring back the removing of the Carvolth designation.
On this, because it is, like I said, you have to move forward some direction, and if it's to amend the policy, that's one part of it. Certainly, any motions? Councillor Davis.
Okay. I'm starting to get in the jive here, and I'm feeling that I think it's a good idea to move 08, and I also think it's a good idea to take Carvolth out. But we've had these applications come in. They came in the summer and some before that, and now we're kind of changing things around. I don't know if this is the time to be changing them. Well, it is obviously the time that we should be changing them. But I do like if you did remove the black line around Carvolth, you would tidy up. But there's 1, 2, 3 applications in there that have gone in there in that spot. We shouldn't have had that spot there if we weren't going to if we're putting the applications in. So I'm kind of having different thoughts here now. And I think that we've got to move on here, but I just wanted to point out that if I go ahead and invest my money and get an application out, and then all of a sudden they don't even have that that is changed, all changed. That would kind of make me feel unfair. And I'm wondering if this is starting to not look a good idea. It's not feeling good for me. Anyhow, just a comment. I'm sorry, I'm not being positive. I'm kind of being negative a little bit. Over.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. So no further discussion. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed?
Councillor Richter, Councillor Davis, Councillor Woodward.
Long.
Anybody else? Councillor
Yeah, Long opposed.
Okay, so the motion fails on tie vote. Okay, so we'll move on.
I'd like to make a motion, Your Worship.
Okay,
Can I make a motion to remove the black line?
Okay, so let's be clear on the motion now. We
Yeah.
discussed before. So your motion is to amend the policy to remove the carve-out designation.
That's correct. And
to reduce
those
it to,
and those applications that are within that will just fall into wherever they were, right? They would fall, 2 would fall into Willoughby and 1 would fall into Walnut Grove.
Okay, and so then it is also to reduce the number of retail cannabis outlets from 8 to 7.
No, I don't think so, Your Worship. The applications would still be valid,
okay,
but they're going to be in the part of in the designation community that they're in, not in this call.
I just want to be clear. So just Mr. Backen. Yeah, because if you lose, so what you're, Mr. Backen is clarifying, if you remove the area, and this is an amendment to the policy, you're reducing the number that we will be approving from 8 to 7. That's what.
Oh, I see. In total, yes. In total, they would only be. That's correct. Yeah.
Oh, the area.
So that's your motion. Is there to amend the policy? Seconder is Councillor Whitmarsh. Okay. Discussion on that. Again, I'm not going to support it. I think we do have policy that was established, and these folks have applied under that policy. So I'm be supporting Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I view this as just again highlighting that I can't even recall a process like this to approve anything. But I think that, in regards to looking at Carville and Willoughby together, maybe we can head in that direction rather than modifying boundaries again, that we put out to proponents who spent a lot of money preparing applications, potentially paying rent on these locations. Potentially this may not be necessary if we look at not considering the one at 72nd and 208th any further. We could just look at the Carville ones as Willoughby ones, since we don't see one at Willoughby Town Center. So I don't see the need to keep changing boundaries. I think maybe too, it'd be interesting to consider just removing all of the boundaries from all of the community basis and just consider 4 or 5 throughout the township in different locations. I find that this has just become, again, a bit of a parody of itself. Thanks.
Davis?
Sorry, did you say me?
Yeah, you're
okay. You know what? I'm going to support this. And I know I just said opposite, but the 2 applications that are on south are still there. They're still going to be an applicant. The application on the north is still going to be an applicant. It's not like we're taking anything away. It's just we're dropping maybe that was a mouthful. Maybe we just put 4 or 5 or 6 in the whole of Langley and drop them all. That maybe it might have made it a little less complication, but you know what? We're here now. We're moving on. And so thank you. That's my comments.
Yeah, well, I think this accomplishes a couple of things. We heard earlier that some councillors felt there were too many locations within the township, so this will reduce the total amount, and it solves the problem of the previous motion to put Walnut Grove back in Walnut Grove. So I think it's a win-win. I hope it will be.
Councillor Woodward?
Yeah, I just want to add some additional rationale for people to consider as we continue to debate this, that I actually, again, I'm struggling with the whole premise of the policy. I actually would be more comfortable with perhaps a couple of competitive retail outlets, perhaps 2 in Carville at the interchange, which seems like a pretty good location for Willoughby and other areas of the township to reach, and not necessarily allow one in Murrayville, potentially in other areas, maybe no more than one in Aldergrove. So I don't see why we necessarily even have to restrict ourselves to one in Carville, given the accessibility by car on the freeway to that location and the transit exchange at that location. What would be wrong with two at Carville? So again, I don't accept the premise of the policy to begin with, but certainly don't support this change for what feels like the sake of changing something. Thanks.
Yes. Oh, Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think that, the process this is a start of where we might go. This is looking at potentially 7 areas instead of 8. I would have preferred to keep it the way it was, but that was defeated. So this is another way to do it. I think it's more fair for the applicants and not less fair. And we can consider having 2 in Carville area down the road. We can change that. We can have 1 or 2. We can have 3. There's nothing that binds us as a council that says we can't change it, and we can adapt and change. I would imagine that where the locations of some of these places are and how many we have might be very different 5 and 7 years from now than it is today. What we're doing is identifying a starting point. And by doing this, we're going to suggest that we're going to start with 7 areas with this motion if it passes. And we would accept 1 in each of those areas to start with. That doesn't mean we can't change and evolve. I expect this whole process of cannabis retail to be an evolving process over the next number of years, and council will continue to discuss and consider as we grow as a community, as our community shapes and develops. I don't think this is the end, start and finish of everything to do with cannabis retail today. So I think this is a good start.
Councillor Ferguson. Mr. Ferguson?
You better take the headset.
I didn't even hear you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to say that there's been an awful lot of dialogue, and I've heard some interesting discussion about the fact of putting 2 in the Carville exchange, which in a way, thinking it now, because it's been mentioned by 2 other councillors, that does make some sense. So hearing that and knowing that, perhaps I'd be with you, Mr. Mayor, if you are saying you're not supporting the motion, is to keep it the way staff has designed it for us, so we can move forward accordingly and respecting what they've done. So thank you.
Is there any further discussion? We call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Councillor Arnson, we're opposed. Councillor Woodward, Councillor Ferguson, Arnson, Ferguson defeated on 5 votes. Okay, so
Ferguson opposed.
Yeah, Ferguson opposed. Yeah, I got that. So to be on tie vote. So this basically brings us back to square one.
Can I just
and it's
clarify?
good to have that discussion. I think it's good to have the discussion so it clarifies where council is going to go with it. And so.
Oh, it's staying in.
Well,
okay.
It is, yeah. So
okay.
It's good to have that discussion and have a vote because it moves us forward. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I just want to mention, Mr. Mayor, if you want to continue with some additional discussion, that'd be helpful. I did want to just make a motion to not consider further the retail cannabis location roughly located at 72nd and 208th Street.
So
I'll second that.
Sure. We just
it doesn't
be sure on. I understand which one it is. I just want to get the number. I'll look it up.
It looks like number 10.
Okay. So to remove number 10.
Mr. Mayor, I would also like to.
Sorry, was there a seconder? Who seconded that?
I'd like to amend the motion, Mr. Mayor. So can I clarify the motion, Mr. Mayor, before it's seconded? Before we get seconded, if you want to make it clear. I'd like to move that we no longer consider further the application located at roughly 208th and 72nd Street, however you want to word that, and also to refund their application fees.
Okay, fair enough. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second.
Whitmarsh seconds. Councillor Woodward, discussion?
Nope, I think it's self-explanatory. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I haven't pushed my button because I got so many buttons here, but can I get a rationale as to why number 10 is coming out?
It's Councillor Woodward has chosen not to speak to it, so I don't know what the rationale is, but maybe we should speak to it. We have to know. Councillor Davis?
I too would I would have thought that if we're going to move on to public hearings of them, then that would have been more of appropriate time to take it off. If it, because right now I would assume we're taking off because it was problematic and there was lots of emails saying this, that, and the other thing. And I just would wonder if maybe is this the appropriate time to take it off? Anyhow, maybe, can I ask that question?
It's up to you. I mean, this is an appropriate time. This motion is valid. However, if you feel it should go through the further process, that's your decision. But it is appropriate. This motion is appropriate at this time.
No. But I'm just, yeah, okay. I've gotten quite a bit of emails saying that, people are not, maybe don't want it, but wouldn't it, so I guess I just have to vote against it, but it's not like I'm voting against it. I'm just voting against the policy of why not wait and let the public hearing take it, inform of us why they don't want it, and then we could have more information at that time to vote against it. Anyhow.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I respect. I mean, I could have spoken to it. It's not just about a couple of emails. For me, I look at the rationale around commercial centers, and I think some of these cases they're more appropriate away from residential areas, such as the Carboth Exchange, or maybe some larger strip mall options that have been presented on 88th Avenue or in Aldergrove. So I view this as a walkable, dense residential area with not a lot of commercial amenities at that location at this time, and view it as a location secondary in quality, in my opinion. Of course, if it proceeds to public hearing, I'm open to any additional information in this regard. But at this point, I think that's the rationale for my motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Long.
Well, I agree 100% with Councillor Davis that this is not an appropriate time in my mind. And I might remind Council that the Carboth area is soon to be a lot of population, a lot of residential, that huge developments that are being built there. There'll be plenty of residential in that area, so that the residential argument to me doesn't cut it. And I think that cherry picking at the moment, or whatever you want to call it, is inappropriate. We should wait until the proper process is in place for that to happen with public hearings, etc. So I won't be supporting it.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Long opposed?
Davis, Long opposed. Motion carries. And so now we'll move on to, I would entertain a motion to approve the remaining 7 on the 7s to go to first and second reading. We can start with that to move down the list from there. So I would entertain that motion. That would help this is directed to staff.
Well, Your Worship, maybe can I make a motion to go with B4 option?
Sure, you can make any motion you want.
Okay, I'll move that we don't do that. We just go with B4 and let staff come back.
Second it. Mr. Davis, any discussion on it? Councilor Long, did you wish to? Right.
No, I think that if we're going to move forward, we're going to have to do it more than just the discussion we've been having so far. We're going to have rationale for all of these applications, and the best people to bring that through, I think, is staff, and that does take the political aspect out of it. So that's why I'm supporting B4 as one of the options presented.
Ask a question to Mr. Seppi as he's put this B4 on as an option. Perhaps you could just give us a little explanation how that would look for staff and what exactly would be coming forward. Are you going to be the staff contemplating that would look like you're going to bring one for each area based on the criteria, or are you going to bring a couple with different recommendations? Mr. Seppi, could you elaborate on that before, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I will. Staff's recommendations are always based on council direction, whether it's in the form of bylaws, plans, policies, or historic practices. So this will not be an exception to that rule. We will follow the policy and other council deliberations, discussions, and bring forward recommendation. Specifically, Your Worship, I think it will be in the same kind of lines as what council has been discussing today, which will be based on a number of different factors. And in the event that there are multiple applications that are meeting the policy objectives and guidelines and council directions and discussions and deliberations, then one prevailing objective criteria will be the time the application has been submitted, and that will be included in the recommendations to council, as well as other I guess, non-policy items that applicants may have put forward. It is not quite clear at this point, Your Worship, because staff has not analyzed those other discretionary items, but it will be a consideration. The reason why it is not something that I guess I can speak to clearly is because of the fact that they don't form part of the original policy provisions. So I don't want anyone to argue that their application was not given appropriate consideration based on the fact that they were not aware of the fact that other considerations was going to be considered. So I think I'll just leave it at that, Your Worship.
Councilor Woodard?
Yeah, thanks. No, I don't support, I think this is a bit premature. I think it highlights again the sort of the unfairness, and I use that in the nicest way possible, the unfairness of this process, so that if you have one in Murrayville and one in Walnut Grove now by themselves, they somehow get fast-tracked compared to the others, where in fact I might be more open to having 2 in the Car-Bolt Exchange and 0 in Walnut Grove and 0 in Murrayville, based upon public input. And now we're separating the dual tracks. We're going to have public input on these while the others are behind, when in fact we should be considering these different options together. We're now going to approve 1 or 2 here and there, and now be stuck with some restricted decision making and lack of flexibility down the road. So I don't support Councillor Long's desire to speed this along for whatever intention he's trying to do here. I would prefer to look at it more holistically than this, than start cherry picking which are going to get faster treatment than the others. Thank you.
Mr. Seppi, because it's an important issue, could you put resolution B4 up on the screen so we can make sure we're addressing the correct direction? So, Mr. Seppi, just to make sure, we're talking about selective processing by staff, and I wanted to underscore one of the key elements I think you referenced, so council's aware. Staff are effectively bound by the direction council has provided through the policy process, either previously or through this discussion. As of right now, I wanted to highlight, if I understood it correctly, that one of the key aspects in item B4 will be the timing of the application. So where applications were to be considered, I guess, equal, we would then default to the timing of the application in terms of which arrived first. If that's council's intention, I think it's a meritorious solution, but it simply means that where all things are considered equal, we'll be deferring to the timing initiative if in fact all things are considered equal.
Good clarification. Councillor Whitmore.
Let me just, thank you. I have some concerns with this as well. I think that, the reality is that we right now have sort of 7 criteria. We have some that got 6, some got 7, and that's kind of the criteria. And, we've already found how difficult it is when we look at the criteria. We have a number of them that are 6 and a number of them are 7. And I'm not sure that staff any better than council is going to be able to decipher which one of those applications is best. And now hearing possibly we'll just revert back to when they applied. And I'm not sure that when they applied is really the best indication of a good application. So my first concern is that I'm not sure how they'll decipher any differently than to default to time of application, and then that may not be the best approach. My second concern with it is that when staff comes forward to council, knowing how we operate as council, I find it hard to imagine that we're going to all just accept exactly what staff is suggesting. So then we'll end up in a debate and a discussion all over again, and we're moving into B3. So really what you're suggesting is we're going to have B4 kind of as a pre-screen, which it seems like they've already done, And then we're going to have B3 have to do it to actually make the decision anyways. So I sort of look at the chart they've given us. It feels like staff's already done the pre-screening. Other than time of the time stamp of when the application came in, I'm not sure what staff is going to do that's any different, and because we don't have policy around it. So then really we're defaulting to C3 or to B3 anyways. So I'm concerned with just moving forward that.
Councillor Ferguson.
I think a lot's been said, Mr. Mayor, about the confusion here, and I would agree that putting the burden on for staff, they've done the best they possibly could. They got an excellent job in piecing this together, putting the right flow charts and the documentation, and summarizing and giving us, making it easy, accessible for us to look at the criteria and move forward. Yeah, I don't think B4 is putting it on staff is going to work. We as a council have to make some of these decisions and move accordingly. So yeah, at this point in time, I can't go with B4.
Councillor Richard.
Yeah, I was actually leaning towards this until Mr. Backen said what we're really voting on is B2. And that's not what the motion says. The motion says B4. If we want a B2, we would have put B2 up. But I personally don't think B2 is fair. I think B2, first come, first serve, basically says those people who have access to extensive consulting and other resources got theirs in sooner than some of the other applicants. So I can't support B2 at all. So I guess I'm going to vote against B4. And the mayor had suggested that we send all these 7s out of 7s to public hearing. I would be, if this one goes down to defeat, I'd be willing to second that motion or put that motion forward for him.
Thank you. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, I too appreciate the clarification there from Mr. Backett, so I appreciate that. I'm a little concerned to, just to proceed with this. So I, again, don't support it. I certainly don't support B2. So if there's any consideration that first come, first serve will be one of these criteria as outlined in the presentation today, I don't support that. And I don't support that for the simple reason of what was the point of extending and creating a deadline at the end of August, if I recall that correctly, for other people who maybe hadn't heard of the opportunity or didn't get to their application knowing there was a deadline in which they could submit by the deadline and maybe make their application better and more complete and more substantive, are now potentially being punished because they didn't rush it down to the counter. So I certainly don't support first come, first serve, and don't support B4 to just have it selected by staff by any criteria. I think that council created this, and council's got to solve it and not make it staff's problem, but have us find a way to work through this. Thanks.
Councilor Long.
Yeah, I'm quite confused. I mean, here we're saying that B4 is actually B2 or B3, and I don't see that it is. Surely there's more criteria that staff will consider besides first come, first serve, because that's B2. So the reason I put B4 through is that the staff would consider all kinds of criteria, just like they do with any rezoning application that comes forward. There's staff support some and don't others for a variety of reasons, and I would hope that there would be a whole variety of reasons that the staff would bring those things forward. So I think when Mr. Bakken said that that's going to be one of the criteria, perhaps it is, but surely that's not the only criteria. Then that would be B2. So can I get clarification from staff?
Yeah, I was going to ask Mr. Severy just because there's been some just clarifying that. And one thing I did hear is that certainly the discussion today, I know it is, staff are very good at listening to council and trying to parse out what we're saying and come back with something. And it really takes any view that there may be favoritism out there, and I don't think there is for any member of council. I don't believe there is, but it takes that away, and that staff will then take the discussion today, come up with something. I think if this does pass, and it may not, but if it does, then we accept the fact that staff are going to make some recommendations, and that is a way forward for us when we're at a point where really it's we have to step forward one way or the other. But that's just my comments. Mr. Steffi, or Mr. Backen?
Thank you, Your Worship. It was my comments. I'll clarify. You may recall that I said that it was if all things are considered equal, it would then as Mr. Seffi indicated, could revert back down to the timing because that's one of the criteria council introduced in terms of the very early preliminary policy discussions. It does beg the question, though, is that the next step? And I guess the answer would be no. There's other criteria that are to be utilized, but most of those criteria are in fact in the report, and we've identified the 7 or so criteria that we've utilized so far. Could staff derive some additional criteria? Well, we'll hypothetically label them 8, 9, and 10. We certainly could, but remember, those are then being developed by staff without any council endorsement of those criteria. The purpose behind the exercise so far has been attempting to develop the criteria that council finds acceptable. There may be other criteria that we could look at. Mr. Seffi, however, has done a very good job of seeing what other communities have done, what's been called the best practices. So the criteria, I guess I'm pointing out that we'll hypothetically label as 8, 9, and 10 may be somewhat subjective at that point, and that is usually the function undertaken by council. So I wanted to clarify that, so thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you for that, Mr. Backen. So I see no further discussion, and so I will now call the question, and this is on the option B4 as presented by staff and moved. Seconded. I'll call the question. All those in I'm going to get my, we could, Mr. Seffi, if you could just remove that screen because sometimes I see hands. Wait, thanks. All right, so I'm calling the question. All those in favor?
Yes.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Okay, so Councillor Arneson, Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Richter, Councillor Woodward, and Ferguson are opposed, so that fails. So let's move on to another motion.
Okay, I'll put my hand up.
All right, Councillor Richter.
I'd like to move that we send the applications that have ranked 7 out of 7 to first and second reading, and from there to public hearing.
Well, for second reading.
Proceed with the 7 out of 7 applications.
Thank you. Yeah, that's is there a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Davis seconds. Discussion. Councillor Long. Oh, Councillor Richter.
No, no, I'm fine.
Speak to it? Okay, so the hands are up here. I just want to.
Oh, I'll take mine down. Sorry. There you go.
So, Councillor Richter, did you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is the only equitable thing to do. If you've scored 7 out of 7, you should be allowed to proceed. But having said that, I do want to raise a flag up here that if we get all the 7 out of 7s and we've got 3 of them in Carval's coming through the public hearing with flying colors, then I think we're going to have a very difficult time with third reading. But it's the only fair thing to do right now.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I like the approach of it. I guess I'd be open. I mean, I'd like to rather would see it expand to include the 6 out of 7s. I think there are some subjective elements that council needs to make a decision on. I'm not sure how ultimately, maybe we end up having just a vote of council on each application, which one gets through and which one doesn't. We talked about 1 in each area. So the policy, unless we change it, doesn't have us have more than 1 in each area. So I think to limit it to this, the 7s, because there's some subjective things about what's commercial core and some are just outside, but it's still in a commercial center. So I'd rather see it include 6s and 7s and have those go to first and second.
Councillor Whitmarsh, we'll deal with the 7 out of 7s, and that can be a subsequent motion. And that way we're dealing with each one separately. So
okay,
this doesn't, by approving this motion, or if this motion is approved, it does not eliminate the 6s.
Okay.
It can be a subsequent motion. It's not inclusive.
Thank you.
Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could get some clarification also maybe for the sake of the public that may be watching and some of the proponents, could I get clarification from staff if this is approved and subsequent motions are not approved, the 7 out of 7 would eliminate which applications?
There's the chart.
If you could point me to the page, I'd appreciate that.
Oh.
Your Worship, may I offer some comments?
Mr. Seffi can help.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Your Worship, just I guess consistent with what I understood Councillor Whitmarsh's comments to be, there's a degree of subjectivity and I guess interpretation, if you will, or understanding at a higher level when you try and dive into the specifics of the criteria that are outlined in the policy. So what I mean by that is, as an example, an application may have scored 6 out of 7, but by necessity, that is the case because of the fact that there are what may be perceived to be, I guess, conflicting requirements within the policy itself. As an example of case in point, the policy states that you must be within a commercial area to be considered. It also says not within 200 meters of a park. Well, a commercial area in some cases is actually within 200 meters of a park. So that then, I guess, by extrapolation or by conclusion, removes one point from an application that is trying to meet the objectives of the policy, so it's no longer able to achieve the 7. So that is the comment I wanted to provide in terms of, I guess, potential subsequent motions that may fail should this one pass. It's just something for council to keep in mind that it's not always easy to just take one criteria and consider it in the absence of the other criteria. It should be a holistic approach as to the intent of the policy with respect to each one of the applications.
Thank you, Mr. Sefi, for that clarification. It's important. As we return to Councillor Woodward's question, though, I think he's simply looking for a list of those that are would achieve the 7 of 7, and then we can review the list that would see 6 of 7, and then review the list that would be potentially 5 of 7. I think we can look at the C1 page 2 with the chart that you provided, that while it doesn't have the numbers, can fairly easily extrapolate at least the 7 of 7s, because I think in that circumstance, if it's located in the commercial center and located outside all buffer areas, if it's got a yes to both of those, that would represent those that achieve the 7, would it not?
That's correct, Your Worship. I think this is the chart that Mr. Backen's referencing, although it doesn't have the numbers referenced, the 7 out of 7, but is the entirety of the applications received prior to August 31st, all of them shown, and the last 2 columns it's giving the information regarding whether it is A, located in the commercial center of each one of those community areas, and B, whether it's located outside of the buffer area. So as an example, if you look at the Carvault applications, all 3 of them are essentially ranking with the number 7 because they are meeting the objectives of the policy.
So, Mr. Sefi, if we help council with this then, as we look down the Aldergrove applications, none scored a 7 of 7. Is that correct?
I'm just going to scroll down the presentation and get to Aldergrove. So the Aldergrove applications, none of them scored a 7. But again, if you look at the chart indicates, the summary chart indicates that 3 of, is it 3 or 2? Let me just check.
Well, Mr. Sefi, I think the point is, at the first blush, none achieved the 7, but another motion, as was entertained or suggested, dealing with the 6s, would likely cover those off. So we're trying to move incrementally through the list. If we look at Fort Langley, I believe it is 2 that achieved the 7 of 7. That's applications number 7 and number 18.
Yes, so in Aldergrove, as you can see on the chart here, none of them achieved 7 out of 7. You're correct.
That's correct. So as we go to to Fort Langley, looks like applications number 7 and 18 achieved the 7. Keeping in mind, we'll be returning to those that achieved the 6. So we have 2 in Fort Langley.
So 7 and 18 have ranked 7 out of 7, have been marked having met 7 of the 7 criteria points.
Okay.
Criteria points.
Now, as we go forth to Carvault, originally all 3 of the applications would have met the 7 criteria. The reading application, however, being moved into Walnut Grove by a previous motion, would be outside the commercial core of Walnut Grove, and therefore for the moment would achieve a 6. So the effect of this motion would be to advance numbers 1 and number 17.
Sorry, I thought that motion didn't pass.
Oh, thank you.
The motion failed.
So, if it failed on a tie vote, then all three would achieve the 7 of 7 then.
That's the way it looks. Yes, correct.
Okay. Murrayville, being the next one, did not achieve 7 of 7, so it would be in another category. Walnut Grove did achieve a 7, so that would be one that's being advanced. And Willoughby has been already excluded. That's the one that was excluded around 72nd Avenue. And that would then leave us with Willowbrook, where we have applications number 2 and number 6 would achieve the 7 of 7 scoring.
That's correct. And as I referenced earlier, there have been other applications received, and I do know that there's an application in Brookswood that, unless otherwise directed by council, it will rank equally and brought forward for consideration.
Right. There's more applications in the system that could be warranting consideration. The August 31st deadline, however, ranks them at a later date, unless, of course, there's no application received. And one such example is Brookswood. So when it comes forward, Brookswood certainly can be processed because there's no other competing application.
That's correct.
So, Your Worship, I think that's our attempt to try to outline those that met the 7 of 7 criteria.
Echoing. Thanks so much.
Yep. No, I think those represent the ones that met the 7 of 7 criteria.
Thank you. All right, Councilor Ferguson.
Oh, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, I'm still here. I would actually require, with this motion to move forward, need to require division on the Fort Langley items to be voted on separately and considered separately.
All right, thank you. We'll divide the Fort Langley out. We'll do with them last. So,
okay, so
that's the motion. Second.
Declare conflict on those. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight again that I appreciate that summary from.
So first, I'll take the division. I'll take the division. So okay, so you can speak to. So divide this motion to take Fort Langley, put them as a second part of this motion, not the first part. Do I have a second to that? And a show of hands, all those in favor? All those carried. Okay, thank you. So Councilor Woodward, now you can speak to the others. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That's helpful. So yeah, I think sort of highlights that while I definitely support the idea of trying to find a way to prioritize the best applications, you know, still maybe some of the 5s could be set aside, but I kind of concur with Councilor Whitmarsh need to look at some of the 6s. So if that can be done separately, of course, I don't see anyone objecting to consider any of the 7s. So I will support the motion. Mr. Mayor, on the understanding that you'll be considering the 6s and 5s potentially separately.
That's up to council to put a motion for us, so you consider a motion like that. This is not excluding the subsequent motion. Councilor Ferguson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that Mr. Backen has also indicated how there could be different ways of interpreting and looking at the actual scaling and otherwise. I was doing some research and with the liquor as everybody's on the phone, everybody's working this last 2 hours. And I want to ask a question through Chair. If we in Aldergrove decide to put a cannabis retail, apparently is a provincial guidelines that no one else can put one from either another community can put one in within a certain designation of distance, if I may, through a chair?
Mr. Seven.
And not that staff is aware of, Your Worship. This is a municipal locational guideline that we have. As far as I am aware, and staff has been able to determine from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulating Branch, there are no such provisions in the current legislation. It may be a consideration for the general manager of LCRB, but it's not, as far as I know, again, I don't believe it's a criteria for them to follow at this point.
Because I'm looking at something, I'm trying to interpret it. It says if one community has a cannabis retail, the provincial guideline prevents a second community from having one within 1 kilometer. So if we
that would mean then first in.
Yeah. if we were to say no to us, then that would open the door for Aldergrove, for Abbotsford to put one in, and then we wouldn't be able to put one accordingly within 1 kilometer. I'm just saying, that's what I'm reading. I'm not sure if that's true or not.
Right, Councillor Richter.
Oh, I'm finished.
Oh, you're not done? Okay, I thought you're done. Sorry,
Okay,
Councillor.
Mr. Backen indicated there's an awful lot of things, different interpretation. My interpretation is, again, is that taking out whatever the commercial center or location, commercial use within a community, and taking out the fact is the location within 200 meters. I see there would be 1, 2, 3 in Aldergrove that, well, pardon me, if not 3 or 4 in Aldergrove, there would be 6 or over, and 2 would be 7s. But anyway, just pointing that out, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Richter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not liking the idea that we're changing the criteria that staff have rated for us for the sake of getting something pushed through in Aldergrove. We have 2 6 ratings in Aldergrove. I agree with the suggestion that was made earlier about we should go through the 6s and on a 1-by-1 basis, because I don't think all the 6s are equal, and decide which of those 6s we want to push through. But with the 7s, we've got 8 applications now going through to first and second reading. So, you know, we've got enough on our plate with 8. I don't even think we need to do the 6s, and we certainly don't need to do the 5s. So that's just my comment. I think that I like the idea of doing all the 7s in one batch, because they're all 7s, and then work through the 6s 1 by 1. And I think we have to work with the ratings that we've already got in this paper. Thank you.
See no further discussion, so I'm going to call the question. This is to allow the 7s to proceed. All those application. All the 7s without Port Langley. Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. And now we'll deal with the Port Langley 7.7s. Councillor Woodward wishes to go to the Buffy Well. Ms. Bauer, we'll put you in the waiting room. Okay, so see no discussion on that. I'm going to call the question on the Port Langley ones. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Ask Councillor Woodward to come back. Okay. All right, so now we're back. So now there's talk of looking at the 6s. So I'm just going to quickly go through my chart. Just to clarify, Ms. Bauer, the Willoughby committee, what was so much discussion? The vote on the Willoughby one, number 10, is it? It's a 6 out of 7. Was it eliminated? Sorry?
The Willoughby application at 72nd and 208, it was carried.
It was carried to be eliminated. Okay, so we're not dealing with that one. We have.
Your worship, may I request a clarification on that particular?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
I understood the intent was also to refund the fees.
What was what, sorry?
With number 10.
Yes, refund the fees. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So that's out. I'm just going through my list here. There's a 5. We'll talk about that. So here's my first 6, and this is Fort Langley Community. You know the conflict. That's number 14. All right, that's the first 6 I see. And then there's Murrayville. That's number 11. And then there's the Aldergrove ones. Just to be clear on those, we have number 4. We have number 5, and that's it. So of the ones I can see, I see number 14, number 11, number 4 are the 6s that are left. That are to be done. So if a member of council wishes to put a motion forward, and I would ask that the motion maybe be in 3. There is 1 Fort Langley one, and that would be dealt separately to allow council ordered conflict. So Fort Langley one was number That was number 14. So if someone wishes to move 11, 4, and 5 to proceed, Councillor Whitmarsh moves it. And there's something there.
Just a second, Mr. Mayor, I've got my hand up. Shouldn't I be allowed to
Okay.
make a motion?
I did too.
Sorry, I just got my head down. That's the problem. I'm trying to figure this whole thing out. So one way to do it is put them forward, and then if council wishes to amend to take them out, then that's maybe one idea, but
Or are we also allowed just to divide them all?
we could do that.
Take them one at a time?
Sure. So if we can get a motion of the 3 on the floor, is all I'm asking for, then we can go through a process. We can divide and then do each one. At least we have some direction. So Councilor Whitmarsh moves it, and seconded by, who's the seconder? Councilor Davis. Okay, so it's on the floor. So a motion to divide. We have a motion to divide. Someone want to move that?
Yes, I'll move that.
Councilor Richter, Councilor Davis seconds motion to divide. So we do show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed and carries. Opposed, Councilor Whitmarsh opposed. So it carries. So we're dealing only with number 11, number 4, and number 5, just to be clear. And so that we'll deal with 14 separately. So number 11 is the Murrayville one. And so we have divided. So we'll start with the Murrayville one and have discussion on that one only. So I have 2 speakers for that one. Councilor Whitmarsh.
Okay, well, I don't understand why we would decide which ones are going and not out of the 6s. I think we should send them all. There are too many subtleties to try and decide it here at the table, but so I'm supportive of it going forward.
Thank you. And it is going forward. It's just that we've divided it. So. Great. Councillor Long on number 11.
Yeah, well, I if we're going through them one at a time, I agree with the comments made earlier. I don't think we should be doing it at this point, and I don't know why we would eliminate Murrayville. I don't know what the concern may be there, but there is a commercial zone there, a node, right? And so I don't support removing any of them at the moment. Now that we've got this far, I think they should all go forward, and there are good reasons that some of the sixes should be considered.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. The motion to divide was made. Why is Councillor Long backtracking?
We're not backtracking. We've made a comment on all of them.
I'm not supporting the motion to divide.
No, the motion to divide has been carried. So we are moving forward. We're dealing with number 11 right now. So I see no further discussion. So I'm going to call the question on number 11 to proceed. All those in favor?
Okay. What is the question on number 11? To remove it, Your Worship?
No, to the decision.
Can I get clarification on what the motion is on number 11?
Is to have number 11 to proceed to what's the wording here? To proceed to staff to bring forward.
Oh yeah, so okay.
Yeah. So that's
all the number 6s. All right. So then,
yes.
Okay.
Not all of them.
Well, not yet. We'll do Fort Langley separately. Okay, so there's only 4, or 4 that we're dealing with. So number 11. I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Proceed. Opposed? Carries. Okay, so now we move on to number 4. Number 4, I believe, is in Alder Grove. Number 4 is in Alder Grove. Yes. So any discussion on number 4 to proceed? None, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Anybody opposed? Carries unanimously. Number 5 is also in Alder Grove. Any discussion?
But wait. We're not doing number 5s, are we?
No, this is number 5.
Oh, number 5.
Number 5, yeah.
Okay.
So it's still, no, it's confusing. Okay, any discussion on that? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Okay, so now, Councillor Woodward, if you wish to declare a conflict, it's fine.
Declare a conflict, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I understand a motion for the Fort Langley application number 14, which is the 6 out of 7. Can I have a motion, please?
Moved.
Councilor Whitmarsh, second by Councilor Arneson. Any discussion? Councilor Richter.
Yeah, wasn't number, which one is it? 14, wasn't that moved with the rest of them?
No, I kept it separate.
You kept it separate?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. So I'm going to speak against this one because we've already got 2 7s in that community. We don't need a 6 as well. So I won't be supporting it.
Discussion? So now I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed?
Opposed.
Councilor Richter is opposed. Motion carries. Okay. Ask Councilor Woodward to come back in. So one left it would be, I'll go back to the beginning of the list. So I'm just going to go through the fives like I did before to see who's left. Application number 50, I was going to go through this application number 50. We may or may not do it, but it'd be nice to have direction to staff either to refer these back to proponents or to not proceed or to proceed with some. So I'm just going to go through the numbers. There's one in Willowbrook, number 15. And then the rest are in Aldergrove, and these are number 3 and number 9, number 12, number 13, 19, and 20. 19, 20.
Mr. Mayor, I move 13, 19, and 20 for Aldergrove.
No, Mr. Mayor, I have my hand up. Point of order.
Yeah, no, okay, well, my head's down trying to count these numbers up. So we have one in, let's maybe because there's so many, we could do them all as a block or we could do it separately. I'm thinking maybe the one that's by itself in, where was that one? 5 in.
Mr. Mayor, I have my hand up because I wanted to make a motion to refer the 5s back to staff to work with the proponents.
Okay. We could do that. I went through this. So if there's a, so to refer all the 5s back, staff, is there a seconder to that? You know, second. So go back to, we can deal with them one at a time, and that way they can be discussed.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, can I make that motion, the 19, 20, and 7?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor.
Not 7, 19, 13, 19, and 20.
Let's deal with it. I'm going to deal with it by area first, and then we'll go to Aldergrove. There's only one that's outside of Aldergrove, and there's the Willowbrook community. There's number 15, and this is the Africans Affairs and Hospitality Group. We can have a motion to refer to staff, or a motion not to proceed, or a motion to proceed. So it would just give staff some direction. So if we have a motion, is there anybody has any?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Richter.
I would move that we don't proceed with that.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? Councillor Woodward, discussion on that. Councillor Richter, did you wish to?
Well, again, the same argument. We've got 2 7s already in Willowbrook. I'm sure one of them will be very successful going forward. We don't need a number 5. So I think it's redundant to waste staff's time and the proponent's time on this any further.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me to consider the 5s at this point. We've got lots of 6s and 7s that we will be moving forward. So whether we defer it until we make a decision on the 6s or 7s, or whether we let them know now that they're no longer being considered. But it doesn't make sense for us to waste staff time until we've made a decision on the 6s or 7s.
Councillor Long.
Yeah, and I apologize if I missed something here, but why are we considering a 5 at all? I mean, I thought we agreed on the 6s and 7s.
Well, we have to give some direction to staff, whether we're going to consider them or not, and just to walk away without direction staff. I think that's right.
So this one has a 5 because I must say that the charts were so confusing. I couldn't figure out. I wish there was a list that had the numbers beside it, but I don't know if other councils had trouble with it, but they were over 2 pages and so forth. Anyway, so this one has a 5. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, and there's the reason it missed out on 2. It's not within 200 meters a buffer of a Coop Children's Daycare Center. The other one is not located within 200 meters of municipal boundary. So those 2 knocked it down to a 5, or gave it 5 points. So that's
so it is located within a boundary. You mean?
It's not located within 200 meters of a municipal border. So it's within 200 meters of a municipal border, and it's within 200 meters of a buffer of a Group Children's Daycare Center. So you look on page 11, you'll see that one. So that's why it's a 5. So it is fair for council to make a decision to proceed or not. So
I think that we should uphold the boundary one. So if it is within the boundary of 200 meters, then I don't think it should go.
That's fair.
Okay. So I'm not sure which way I'm voting.
so
the motion is.
Sorry, the motion is to
proceed.
I'm sorry, it was not to proceed.
The motion is to not proceed.
Not to proceed with number 15. It's not to proceed. It's to give staff the direction allow the proponent to know that we're not proceeding.
Yeah, okay.
That is part of, remember the matrix, the provincial matrix, we give direction, proceed or not.
Yeah.
So I'm going to vote against it. I'm going to vote in favor of not proceeding based on the fact that it is within 200 meters of the daycare and also within the municipal boundary. So those are the reasons I'm voting for it not to proceed. Councilor Woodward?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, I mean, I find the 5s and the 4s and the 7s and the 6s, I mean, a bit of an arbitrary criteria matrix. So for me, I don't see how relevant a 200-meter setback from a municipal boundary really is. 200 meters, you can walk that in what, a minute and a half. So I don't see how this is, pushing it down to a 5 and we're no longer considering it. I'll take the daycare item pretty seriously, but I don't know many toddlers that smoke cannabis. So for example, I don't know if it's arbitrary to, again, pick some others and now tell this person they can't proceed because of an arbitrary criteria around a municipal boundary, which really, I don't even understand the rationale for why that's relevant. So I will, I understood in the staff presentation of it's a consideration that another municipality may place a location close to ours, but that happens with gas stations and Starbucks and all kinds of things. So I don't really accept that this is a 5. So I would vote to have it considered along with some of the others that seem to score as sticks, but in some ways actually are an inferior location when you consider the entire township. I think Willowbrook is a good location. Some of these strip malls down there are good potential locations to consider versus some of the others that are proceeding, such as Murrayville. So I would support seeing it proceed to public hearing along with some of these others if that one criteria is pushing it down to a 5. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'll call the questions, and to be clear, this is for number 15, do not proceed any further. So voting in favor is it doesn't proceed. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed?
Opposed.
Councillor Arnson, Councillor Ferguson, and Councillor Woodward are opposed, so 15 will not proceed. So
Mr. Mayor, I'd have a motion, if that's okay, to refund the application fees for this applicant as well, based again on criteria that have materialized after their application.
I'll second that.
Yeah, point of information. Yeah.
I'm just going to, Councilor, just hold on a second. Mr. Seffi, can you advise how much that application fee is?
Your worship, I will have to check.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get back to you right away.
There's discussion. So Councillor Woodward, your hand is up. Did you wish to?
No, I think that I did that on the other one at 72nd and 208. I think it's appropriate that if we're, revising these things and making these decisions that, based upon a shifting groundwork, a framework that applicants have the right to have their pretty substantial application fee refunded based upon it being site-specific zoning amendment things.
I might ask that to make things go a little quicker, that if you wanted to amend your motion to apply to anyone that is not, that council decides not to proceed on.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Meeting.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
So as amendment.
Let's just do that for anybody that's sent back at this time. Yeah.
We don't have to go through this each time. So by unanimous consent, unless someone's opposed to that.
No.
Okay, Councillor Long.
So first of all, we don't even know how much we're talking about. The substantial fees don't come until the business license hits. Staff have spent a whole pile of time on it, so there's been resources expended by the township. It is an interesting scenario because it's new, but I mean, this happens on any application that a developer or anyone makes. They'll make applications, some of them go through and some of them don't, because that's what council is here to do, to decide how it moves forward. So it's unfortunate, but first of all, if we don't know how much we're talking about, why are we making this motion? And secondly, just a moment, I'm not sure that you're on the floor. And I think Mr. Safey was going to let us know how much that was, but regardless of how much it is, the principle here is you made an application, staff has spent time on it. That's the cost of doing business. So I don't believe that we should be letting the taxpayers pay for the work that staff have done. If the application changes, it's because council decided that's the best thing for the community. That's the way it goes.
Fair enough. Councillor Woodward?
Hopefully we can get that number. A site-specific zoning amendment is pretty costly. I consider it pretty costly, and I'm not sure that if we're sending it back based upon a matrix that's been shifting without first and second reading consideration, without a public hearing, that really that we should be keeping these fees. It feels, I've heard from a couple of people, it's turned into a bit of a racket where, we've got how many countless applications generating lots and lots of money. We're only going to approve a few of them. I find it a little unfair. So I do stand by the intent of the motion, which is to be more fair and reasonable to some of these proponents that are not going to proceed further through the process. I kind of reject Councillor Long's attitude to just keep whatever money we have. I think it's not on our business plan to be generating a bunch of application fees and then keeping them. So I would sympathize with some of these proponents and feel it's appropriate and reasonable and the right thing to do to return the application fees to these people at this time. Thanks.
So, Mr. Sethi, I'm just going to wait for Mr. Sethi to come back to that number. If he's able to get that.
Yes, I know, Your Worship. I've asked staff and I'm waiting, and I'll let you know as soon as I hear back. I
Okay.
don't want to leave the monitor. I didn't want to leave my office in case a question was raised for me specifically, but I'm waiting for staff, and I'll let you know as soon as I hear
Sure. So,
back. And,
We should table this then, I suppose.
yeah, I think,
here we go, Your Worship.
excuse me, I think what I'll do is I could use a little bit of a break. So why don't we take 5? Staff will come back with the answer, and so we'll just declare a 5-minute recess, or say come back at 4:20. How's that? 4:20 would be appropriate for this decision, for this day today is what we're doing. I think that's a perfect time. 4:20. All right, take a break. Thanks.
Uh-huh.
All right, is everyone back? Mr. Okay, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3. All right, so everyone's back. I'll reconvene the meeting. Mr. Sethi, do you have that answer for us?
yes, I do, Your Worship. I apologize for the delay. So we have 3 sets of fees, 2 of which have been or are applicable at the initial rezoning for cannabis retail application stage, and they total 6,700. So there's a 3,500 rezoning text amendment. So that's 3,500 plus an additional 3,200 for cannabis retail, which brings the total rezoning fees to 6,700 per application. And then at the business license stage, there's an additional $5,000 that's applicable at that point. So 6,700 total.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, so see the hands. I don't know where we're in the discussion. Councilor Long, Councilor Ferguson.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. So it's a bit of money, but I mean, we have to think of a precedent we're setting here too. There's many applications that council rejects at various stages, and that's the way it goes. So would that mean that anybody's application, no matter what it is, that doesn't meet the success of council is going to get refunded? I think that's a bad precedent to set. And staff have expended the time on these applications. I would imagine it's not money that we keep. It's money that's been expended on staff time, and we're keepers of the taxpayers' money, and I think that it should be paid. So I don't think I support refunding it.
Thank you. Councilor Richter?
Oh, I'm muted, sorry. Actually, this is a first time through scenario. This is not a standard process that's been tried and true and in place for dozens of years. And I think it's fair at this stage to refund the money to those, as this is a first time through, who are not going to be successful this time around. And to keep their money, I think is just not fair to them. Those that we have decided to send through to the public hearing process, those ones now, because they've got the authorization to move forward, those fees will not be refunded if they're not successful. But these ones who never even got the chance to get to first and second, I think it's only fair that they get refunded.
Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to sort of highlight again that, I was focused on the criteria of the municipal boundary, and I think we'll be hearing about that again in Aldergrove here in a moment. That, I'm not 100% clear on the timeline. I don't want to get too bogged down on it, but some people have suggested to me that they made their applications based on a certain set, and then the municipal boundary criteria, came out after they made their application, and now they've made their application at this location. Now there's new criteria being created. At least that's their summary of the situation. And if that's even remotely possible, that there was a lack of awareness around some of these criteria, and now they're shifting, that I think at the very least we can do given that that decision has now been made by this council, that the very least we can do is be fair and reasonable and return their fees. Because I highly doubt that some of these people would have chosen these locations had these been criteria been defined in advance. And once again, highlighting my frustration and concerns with how this whole process is being conducted by council. Thank you.
Councilor Davis.
I just want to highlight, I think that because it's the first time through, I hear Councillor Long, you know, times we've spent money on it, but the first time through, if it's not even get to a public hearing, then this time I think we should be refunding. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, and this is for anyone that we do. All in favor? Opposed?
Opposed?
Councilor Long opposed?
Yeah.
Else opposed? Carries. Right. So now, before we miss the motion as amended. That's right. So the motion was amended. This was number. You got to help me catch up here. It's number 15. Is that correct? Where are we? We had a motion. A separate motion was to refund 15. So the motion as amended. So now we're back to the motion as amended to refund 15 and all of 15 and any other ones that come forward. That's it. Thank you for that. So I'm going to call the question.
Mr.
Yes.
Mayor, do we need to clarify that motion to?
So the motion is to refund the application fees to number 15 and any subsequent ones that we do not proceed with at today's meeting. So we're not.
Do not proceed. Yeah. Do not go forward. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Rather than doing it on each one.
Thank you.
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? The motion is amended and opposed.
Opposed? Yes. Long opposed.
Long opposed. Okay. Motion carries. So now we've dealt with number 15. We have this motion on the floor about refunding any subsequent ones. We're into Alder Grove, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are defined. What we could do, I think, to be fair, to give direction to staff that we're proceeding or not proceeding, is we could move all of them and then divide and just go through each one on its own merit. So if we have a motion on all of them to, I don't care if it's to proceed or not to proceed.
I'll move all of them to not proceed.
Not proceed. Is there a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Councilor Richter seconds it. Thank you. Now I'm going to ask for a motion to divide this. So we can go one at a time. A motion to divide.
Move to divide one at a time.
And second, Councilor Ferguson moves. Seconder. Councilor Arneson. A show of hands. All those in favor to divide. Any opposed?
Opposed.
I'm opposed.
Okay,
I'm
Councilor
opposed.
Whitmarsh opposed. Councilor Richter opposed. Who else is opposed? I missed. Councilor Woodward opposed.
Long.
And Long opposed. So divide fails. So that means they're all on the floor. If there's anybody who wishes to change it, it has to be to amendment. So we'll go through the list here. Councilor Ferguson.
Oh, yeah.
You're muted. Councilor Ferguson, you just muted yourself.
I did. So we're doing one at a time, or we're going to make
they're all being moved to not proceed. If there's any
okay,
desire
so
by council
I would move
any.
that number 12, number 19, number 20 proceed.
Okay, is there a seconder to that? I don't see a seconder, so we'll move on. Councilor Richter? Councilor Richter, you're muted. There we go.
Sorry, I think that was a residual from the last motion. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Woodward?
Yeah, same, Mr. Mayor.
Same, okay. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Oh, Councilor Woodward, yes.
Yeah, so sorry. So if we're discussing all of the fives all together, up or down?
Number 3, they're all to not proceed. So
to not proceed. So if we want to make an exception, because I must admit I'm struggling with sending 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 applications packing like it's almost nothing. So I really struggle with this one. I would like to see if there's some other consideration from other members of council around this to take some caution before arbitrarily sending packing 5, 6 applications, essentially leaving only 2 remaining, based again on this arbitrary criteria of check marks on a page. You know, some of these criteria meaning more than others, in my opinion. We're not really weighting the criteria in a sense that every item is equal, but I don't find some of these to be equal. And so again, I find this all very arbitrary. I'm not sure if there's some way to get some more time to consider the Aldergrove, given the volume of applications in Aldergrove, but to arbitrarily send packing 70, 80% of them on this matrix, I don't support. Thanks.
Councillor Richter.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're just not proceeding at this stage with them. They're welcome to go back, in my opinion, and work with staff. Maybe they can find an alternate location or a better location, but I just don't think we should be wasting more time on fives, just like I said with the other one. We've put enough staff time, and so have the proponents. We've got 2 viable candidates in the 6s there. One of them hopefully will make it through, and then that's it. Aldergrove solved. And if it's not solved, then one of the 5s might want to change their location and come back and try again.
Councillor Ferguson.
Well, yeah, I still think, as I said, that Councillor Woodward has said, I mean, the idea of just reluctantly moving ahead with some, and I've said it before, I mean, it's some of these people that we're throwing out the door without even looking at them. I've mentioned 3, not 1, but 3, well, at least 2 of them could be 7s. And that's based upon the fact they're a commercial use. And the second thing is that they're within the 200 whatever meters of the boundary, which I've said before that, you know, that there is a criteria. If we say no or even don't consider, I mean, who knows what we'll do. And that means that opens up the door automatically for another community to say, great, we can put one on our border because Langley doesn't want any. I mean, those are all things that need to be considered. That's the way I certainly see it. And if you need a motion that all the 5s be sent back to staff for a analysis of that criteria, well, perhaps that's maybe what we need to do. So I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if you want that or that's what we're looking at. I'm not sure. I was looking at fairness here. So if you want a motion that those 5 be sent back to staff to consider.
No, there's a motion on the floor right now. And so let's just be clear. People have done a lot of work, and staff have done a lot of work. We have, as council, and members of council consider this, you vote the way you feel. But by saying that, we're just throwing them out and look at them and have a look at them. And I'm looking at across the matrix here, and again, the daycare pops up quite a bit. The municipal boundary pops up quite a bit, and it's consistent with the last decision. That's why I'm supporting this forward. But that's fair.
Mr. Mayor, your mic is cutting out. Sorry, we can't hear you.
Okay. Listen, not important. Just babbling on. We're going to get this thing through. Councillor Woodward, and then we can maybe call a question.
Yeah, thanks. So I think my second time to speak. I guess there's not a lot of interest in debating this, which is fine. But I'm just going to highlight again that we'll be, I guess, communicating back to proponents that spend time and maybe spending money on rent, application fees, applications, putting them together, and they fall to 5 out of 7 because of this 200 meters of municipal border, which I believe came to light even after some had already applied. So they wouldn't have chosen this location to propose if they had known of this criteria in advance. Now they're 5 out of 7. Now they're gone. So I don't support this process. Again, I just find this to be completely unfair and almost want no part of it. Thanks.
I'll now call the question. This is to have number 3, 9, 12, 13, 19, and 20 not proceed. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed?
Opposed.
Councillor Woodward opposed. Councillor Arneson opposed. Councillor Ferguson opposed. And Councillor Davis opposed. That is defeated. So the alternative is that they do proceed. Right. Oh, really do need okay, so Mr. Backman instructs me that we do need a positive motion to go forward. So if we have a motion for them to proceed, that would be helpful. Someone
so moved, Ferguson.
Okay, and okay, seconder. Councillor Arneson. Okay, I'm going to call a question.
No.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Whitmarsh wishes to speak to this motion.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of confused here now. I don't understand why in other areas of Langley, we were fine with selecting 5s to not proceed. But for some reason in Aldergrove, all of a sudden, we're going to now allow all of them to proceed, all 8 applications. I guess I'm confused. Like either we're going to allow all the 5s in every area. Like what's special about Aldergrove that all the 5s get to go through, but nowhere else in Langley? It makes no sense to me. I'm confused, and I guess I'm confused on different members of council voting for some of the 5s not to go through, and then all of a sudden all of these go through. So maybe help me guide here, because I don't understand what we're doing.
So we could go back to the motion to divide this, and then we can discuss each one on its merits, or leave it as a blanket. So if there's a motion to divide, we go through each one. But if there isn't, then these would be for these to proceed. And it's a motion on the floor. I don't see anything, so I'm going to go on to the speakers list. Councillor Richter.
Okay, so are we proceeding with these or not?
If the motion carries, then we're proceeding.
Okay, so the motion is to proceed?
With, yes.
Who moved that? I didn't catch that.
Councillor Ferguson.
Ferguson.
And second by Councillor.
If you want, I could discuss. I can move.
Ferguson
I can
and
speak to it,
who? Excuse me, I have the floor.
Yes.
Ferguson and who? Arneson?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Whitmarsh. This just is not making sense. We're on the one hand saying the 5s can't proceed in other areas, and we're saying, but they can go ahead in Aldergrove when we've got 2 viable 6s in Aldergrove that we've sent forward. I just think this is awfully bad messaging. And if this is about particular applications that individual members of council are favoring, then they should be pulling those applications out and trying to move those individual applications forward. This is just nonsense, and I hope we vote this down.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
He spoke once. I'll go to Councillor Long, then back to Councillor Long.
I'm on there. Yeah. Well, I thought in the beginning we were going to go okay with all the 7s, and there were some 6s that had merit. So we said, okay, 6s and 7s. Now we're down to 5. So I think in all fairness, yeah, we're going to proceed with the 6s and 7s. The 5s ought to wait. Doesn't mean we're declining them, because that motion failed already. But I don't think we should be advancing them either. They should. We should be considering the 6s and 7s, which is, I think, where we were about an hour and a half ago.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been very, 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 very consistent with what I've said this afternoon, is that if you look at it from a layman's point of view and look at where people are located, and you look at the criteria, if there's a commercial use within a small segment of the community, and it is obvious that people think right across the street, you've got malls, right across the street, you've got Safeway or Fresh Start, that's commercial. So I've said that before. Whoever will listen, I'll say that is commercial. So right away, they're getting criticized for having commercial. The second thing is that this 200 meters, which I think the other community would have an advantage over us if we weren't to proceed accordingly. These people may not get it. I've mentioned 3, not 1, but 3. These people may get whoever can present the best, do the best for the community, do the best for the township of Langley. That's where I'm coming. That's why I say at least 2 of them are 7s, and another one would end up being a 6. That's where I'm coming from a personally layman's point of view, looking at the criteria. And as we looked at other ones, some of our commercial cores were already within a buffer area, so they were penalized. We've moved that up. So I think it's another example of something that can move up. And I've been consistent with that and looking at 3.
Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, I take to heart, it's not really me favoring specific applications. I'm struggling with favoring specific criteria, actually, that apply to all applications. I don't even know who how these people are. So, for example, someone's falling to a 5 out of 7 simply three of them because they're located within 200 meters of the municipal border, a criteria that I don't really consider to have much merit in my own opinion. And so for me, those are sixes. So those three, I mean, Mr. Mayor, I would potentially, if you want to divide, I mean, I might consider that, because then those ones I would support going to public hearing based upon my personal opinion that that's not a significant criteria to drop them down to a 5 and then be rejected. At least not even proceed to a public hearing. So that would be 3 right there. And then maybe some of the others that are located next to daycares and so on. Maybe I wouldn't fight as hard for those. But that's the rationale. That's where I'm coming from and struggling with this process. And that's why I'm looking at some of these 5s. I don't necessarily support sending them all either, but I don't support rejecting them all either. So maybe division is appropriate. You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
You're muted, Jack.
Yeah, and a point of information, Your
I'm
Worship.
talking to myself here. Okay, I'll just let me finish. Just that.
Well, point of order.
Point of order. Give us your point of order.
We're not rejecting them. The motion is to advance them. So it's the motion to reject them already failed. So let's be clear on that. This is not a motion to reject them. It's a motion to advance them. And if they're not advanced, it doesn't mean they're rejected. That means they have to come back on another day.
Very helpful, Councillor Long. Very helpful.
Well, yeah, the motion is to advance. So the only tool we have, I was going to say when I was muted, is that amending motion. So I don't know what you'd be amending this one to, because the motion is for the malt advance. But if you wish to, now there was a motion to divide, which Mr. Backer? To divide one by one. One by one. Okay. Okay, thank you. So if you wish to divide a grouping out of it, then that'd be the appropriate motion.
Well, didn't Councillor Woodward move division? I seconded it.
Yeah, it didn't carry, but if you want to change the motion to take a grouping out, as Councillor Woodward has mentioned that he's said there's 3 of them he'd like to take out, you can move that, have those 3 divided, so we're voting on 3. So that's the tools that are available to us.
Okay, so what do we have a formal motion to divide?
There's a motion. No, there isn't a formal motion. So
okay, I'll put a formal motion on to divide the 5s. How's that?
No, that failed. So if you have specific ones you'd like to divide out, provide me with those application numbers so that we're clear on which ones we're dividing out.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, maybe I could be helpful here. I would move to divide out the 3 that are dropping to 5 out of 7 due to the criteria of not being within or being within the 200 meters of the municipal boundary.
So that would be number 12, number 19, number 20.
That's correct.
So number 12, 19, and 20. So Councillor Richter, is that your motion to divide 12, 19, and 20?
No, I don't want to move them. I don't want to.
Mr. Mayor, I'll second that.
Okay, so there's, I have to have a mover first. So who would like to move 12, 19, 20 be divided?
I'll move that.
Councillor Woodward has moved it. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ferguson?
Second, Ferguson.
Okay. So on division, I'll call the question. All those in favor on division? Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed.
Councillor Richter is opposed. Councillor Whitmarsh opposed. And sorry, who else is opposed?
Long.
Long. Okay, Councillor Long. So it carries. So now let's deal with number 3, 9, and 13 first, and then we'll deal with 12, 19, and 20. It's been divided. So 3, 9, and 3, 9, and I'll make sure I got this right. My scribbles here again. 19. Yep. So the motion is for them to proceed. So I'm going to call a question on 3, 9.
Well, just a moment.
3, 9, and 13.
Can we have a moment to have a look at them?
Sure, take a look. Yeah.
Would you mind telling me? So they failed on 3 criteria. Can staff tell us what the 3 are? Certain councils keep talking about the proximity to the boundary, but if they lose on 3, there must be other things.
Well, there are. Yeah. So I can.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, 7 minus 2 is 5. Not 7 minus 3 is 5. Thank you.
3, 9, 13. These are the ones that had the municipal boundary criteria.
Well, what else besides that?
Those ones that didn't. Sorry.
There must be 2 then. Thank you for that correction. So what is the other criteria that they failed on?
Page, you go to report, page 17 and page 18 is the matrix for all the Alder Grove ones. So we'll slow it down. Number 3, Got a 5 out of 7. They were not in a commercial center location, and they were not within 200-meter buffer of group children's daycare center. Okay, that was number 3. Number 9. Number 9 was not in a commercial center, and it's not within 200-meter buffer. It was outside. It was within that 200-meter buffer of a group children's daycare.
Well, the daycare. It was
Right,
by the
number 9.
daycare. Oh, that's the daycare one. Okay.
So number 3 and number 9 have daycares plus. Number 13. Number 13.
Municipal boundary.
Yeah, so it's not within sensitive uses, buffer, school, recreation center, other cannabis storage, geographic barriers, etc. Existing policy. Number 13 also was was within the 200-meter of children's daycare. That was the 2 for number 13. So those are the 3 that we're voting on right now that did not have the municipal boundary criteria. So I'm going to call the question, and this is to proceed.
Well, they also didn't meet the daycare criteria either. So it's not just about the boundary at all.
Right. Number 3.
And what about the recreation center? Number 13 is right next to our
I've already read about
community
number
center.
3, number 9, number 13 did not meet the daycare criteria. You're correct. They're all consistent with. Okay, so this is to proceed. I'm going to call it. Oh, there's another hand up. Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, I just want to highlight, Mr. Mayor, that I just want to again get the numbers again. I just want to slow it down a little bit. If I can get the numbers again to not proceed, is that correct?
No, this is to proceed.
To proceed. Okay, so that's good to get that clarified. The numbers again, please.
3, 9, and 13.
Great. So
no, that's wrong. Point of order. The motion is to proceed, but we're separating them.
We separated. So right now we're voting on 3, 9, and 13 to proceed.
To proceed. Yeah.
Right.
yeah, and so I want to highlight just to make sure I have this right, Mr. Mayor, that if we were to remove the criteria for the municipal boundary, they would actually drop to 4s. Like they are only 5s because they are outside of the municipal boundary criteria, but they're missing on some other criteria that the other ones satisfy.
That's
No.
one way of looking at it. That is one
No,
way
it's
of looking
not.
at it.
It's not.
Council
Two
Long,
of them are
it is.
nowhere. It's
Council
nothing to do with the. It's not.
I know, Council Long, it's okay. It's just a comment. There's another way of looking at it. So I'm going to call the
I'm just
question
trying to
on number.
highlight the logic for the division. If that's helpful to council, that's my logic. So I will be supporting, not supporting these, but then potentially, based on council debate, supporting the others to proceed, even though they're 5s. Thank you.
Okay. So on the question to proceed.
Well, your worship, please, point of order, because this is incorrect what I'm hearing.
No.
There is nothing
It
to
is
do
correct.
with municipal. There is nothing to do with municipal boundaries on these
Mayor,
3.
this is
No,
not
that's
a point of order.
Council. Would I have a point? Council
Not a
Long,
point
this is
of
correct.
order.
I'm going to explain what the motion is once more. The motion is to proceed with number 3, number 9, and number 13. We all have a matrix in front of you. All of them. Number 3, number 9. Where's number 9? And number 13. They're all not located within. They're all fine with municipal boundaries.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question for these to proceed. All those in favor? I've lost my screen. I can get my screen back just to see the hands. Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of them to proceed? All those opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Artisan, Mayor Froese, Councillor Ferguson, was it Whitmarsh hand up? Councillor Whitmarsh, Councillor Woodward, Councillor Davis, Councillor Richter, Councillor Long, were you opposed?
Yes, I'm opposed because
So,
Ferguson opposed.
okay, thank you. So that motion fails. We will not proceed. Now we'll go to number 12, 19, and 20. And just to be fair, if anybody wishes to discuss this any further, I'll open up the queue if anybody wishes to speak to it. I think we've kind of all had to say. So for these to proceed, number 12, number 19, number 20, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor for them to proceed? And opposed?
I'd like to speak.
Opposed.
Well, it's too late. I call the question.
Well, I pushed the button, your worship.
I'll call the question. So who's opposed?
I'm
I'm
opposed.
Mayor Froese, Councillor Richter, Councillor Whitmarsh, and
Long.
who else opposed? Councillor
Long.
Long. Okay, the motion fails. So that means we do not proceed. Is that correct? Okay.
So, so now these applications are gone because 2 of us didn't have a chance to speak.
Oh, not because two of you didn't have a chance to speak. I called the question. I looked, there were no hands, and I called the question.
I clicked the button.
I don't think you can say anything more than what we've already heard, so I do have that right.
Mr. Mayor,
I think I've made a mistake here, Mayor Froese. I voted, I guess, we had done 9, 3, and 13. Now we're doing 19, 20, and 12. So I think I voted in favor. I want to vote in favor of that.
So
I'm sorry.
It
Yeah,
passes
but
in.
it's still, it fails on a tie vote.
No, we got
can do
5.
this.
1, 2.
We can go through this exercise if you wish. If Council Woodward and Council Long wants to speak again, go ahead.
Well, I'm concerned that I made a mistake. I don't know about those guys, but
based on that, I will reopen it just to be fair, so no one can say, you know, the mayor's not allowing everybody to speak, and reconsider this whole thing. So we're right back. Councilor Long, you wish to speak to?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, these, I don't know. Some of us are dominating the conversation, it appears, with this whole issue of not being supportive of being close to municipal boundary. Let me, staff probably should speak up, because this seems to be the practice around the whole region, that's not a good practice to put something right on the border. And in this particular case, in Aldergrove, right across the street, as I mentioned earlier, there's a little strip mall, and a few hundred meters or a few dozen meters to the east, there's another strip mall. So there is potential for this area to be saturated with a number of stores. That's why I don't think that those 3 should be allowed to proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Well, that's certainly not the case. As I say, that has to be explored. That the rules are the community to communities are 1 kilometer boundary. So Abbotsford would not be allowed to, but if we proceeded, they'd be allowed to. That's the point I'm trying to make. And based on what we've just heard, plus, you know, they are in a commercial as well. So, I mean, they actually hit 2 out of 2, some of them. So it would be 2 7s.
Councilor Woodward.
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, first I want to start. I really appreciate you moving reconsideration of this just to give this one last kick at the can here. I think that dominating the discussion, I mean, hopefully that means that I make excellent points that influence members of council. For me, I'm looking at just the location of the municipal boundary and the commercial center location that is affecting 13 and 20, I believe. No, sorry. Yeah, 19 and 20. And these 3 are also being indicated as not being part of a commercial center. Now, maybe I'm simplistic, but I drive down there, and yes, one of them is definitely not, but another across the street is in a very significant large strip mall, but it's within the boundary, and so then it's being a 5. So again, I really would hope that these would go to public hearing based upon, again, this arbitrary criteria of municipal boundary. I'm not aware of a municipal buffer policy that Councillor Long seems to be referencing, where we can't place items within the boundary of our municipality as we see fit. And some sort of bad practice that I reject that. I don't know where that's coming from. So I think, again, these are not to be approved. These are to have a chance based upon some of these arbitrary criteria that appeared after the applications were made in some cases, not in every case necessarily. And so I just wanted to make that one last point before council sends these 3 to be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arnson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I just wanted to point out something. It's sort of a nuanced thought, but it hasn't been brought forward before. It has to do with the boundary issue. My perception is that individuals who are looking to set up any kind of business will have done a study of the area to find out, to the degree that they are currently able, what existing businesses there are. So whatever shopping mall, whatever cannabis retail, whatever kind of store you have, that's just doing your due diligence. So I suspect that if we decide for reasons of our own that it best fits to have something in our community that's by the border, then anybody else subsequently on the other side of the border would have to look at that as a prudent business person and ask yourself, do I want to go where there's somebody in competition right across the street from me? I don't think that makes a lot of sense from a business point of view. And so if there's any comfort from the fact that that likely wouldn't happen from my worldview, then for me, I would rather take into consideration, if it's a really good location, not to worry about some other conditional thing that may or may not happen, because I think it's more likely than not that it won't. Thank you.
Councillor Long.
Well, you just have to look at Starbucks. I mean, there's one on every corner if they can get a chance. So I think that will be a proliferation in that particular area. And that's my concern. So, and then I do reject this concept that it's arbitrary. Perhaps you could have staff tell us why this criteria was added, because this is certainly the flavor of the conversation from certain councils is it's arbitrary. Well, it can't be arbitrary. It was put there for a reason. Can staff explain as to why that was, please?
I can ask them again, but to be fair, it has been explained several times. Mr. Seppi.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. As you may recall, Your Worship, the policy did not include this provision initially. At some point when the applications, I think, were first being considered by council, there was a desire expressed by council for staff to develop additional criteria. On that basis, staff looked to other municipalities and what's being done elsewhere. This was one of those criteria that other municipalities are following. And it's got two, as I understand it, I guess, underlying fundamental reasons behind it. One is the fact that they could be potentially conflicting in terms of the proximity being really close to each other, notwithstanding the provincial requirements that may preclude. Councillor Ferguson was asking earlier about the 1 kilometer provision. That's completely within the mandate of the general manager of liquor and cannabis regulating branch. So to set it aside and say, notwithstanding provincial requirements, we don't want to have too close to each other, similar to other uses that have been discussed previously. The other reason, Your Worship, is potentially to actually be respectful of the wishes of your neighboring municipality. As an example, at this point in time, I know that the city of Surrey has decided not to proceed with any applications for cannabis retail. So I guess a consideration would be to be sensitive to the desires of your neighboring municipality. Those are the ones that I can think of at this point in terms of why this is a best practice for others that we have adopted as an additional criteria in the grand scheme of the entirety of the policy.
Okay, I think now we can proceed to the vote again on this. So to be clear, we're voting at number 12, number 19, and number 20. Proceed. So I'm going to call.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Long's hand is still up. Did he get a chance to speak?
You did. That's the question. Are you satisfied, Councillor? Down. Okay.
Yeah, so that was good.
I will now call the question. For these to proceed, all those in favor? I mean, not to proceed. Sorry, these are to proceed. I'm not in favor. So who? So unopposed. Sorry.
Opposed.
I'm even getting confused, Councillor Davis.
I know. I screwed everything up.
So let's start over again. To proceed, those in favor. Okay, and not to proceed. Or sorry, those not in favor.
Opposed.
Opposed.
Merritt Rose. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Long.
Councillor Long. Defeated on a tie vote. So we don't proceed. Okay, we got that clear. Getting late. All right, so that takes care, I believe, of the C1. Is there any other business? There is a motion to resolve, but unless there's a reason to resolve and to close by any member of council, we don't need to. So with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to terminate.
Termination!
Councillor Davis, and a second. Councillor Whitmarsh, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Thank you very much, council. I know this is a difficult day.
Mr. Mayor, just point of order, we're not going into special close now?
No, there's no need to. I asked if there's anything. There's nothing.
No need. Okay.
So basically, it was just a placeholder for me to get by legislation. So I just want to thank everyone. This is not an easy discussion. We all have to go through this, and for a lot of reasons, but I do believe that council has the best interests in mind. And again, there are some that are going to be successful. We know that in the beginning, and some will not be successful in getting a retail through this first round, but there will be other opportunities, I'm sure, in years to come. But, again, I want to thank everyone for participating.
Thank you.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Have a good night. Yeah, bye.
Thanks, everyone.